your own.
Good afternoon. It is January 22nd, 2025. Welcome to Queen Anne's County Board of Ed working session. Let's stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We need a motion to move into, or to start the open session. Would someone make a motion?
Can I motion for us, the Queen Anne's County Board of Education, to open the budget work session at 3:30 p.m.?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Has everybody had a opportunity to look at the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Are we, may I get a motion? Can someone provide a motion to approve that agenda?
Can I make a motion for us, the Queen Anne's County Board of Education, to approve the January 15th, 2025 agenda as presented?
22nd.
Oh, 20,
It's today's.
22nd as presented.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We're starting with the budget discussion. Item 301.
Yes, good evening, board members. And thanks for this opportunity for the team to come together and talk about our upcoming budget and as we build it together. So we do have some information for you this evening that I'd like to pass out. The first document that is being presented is the FY budget workshop. And this is some information that talks not only about kind of where we are in this budget cycle, some upcoming information that we feel is pertinent to the impact of the budget. And then the end of it kind of just gives you a little bit of a budget 101 that tells you what our different categories are so that you can have a reference point to go back to. And it even describes what each of those categories represent. So we're going to take some time to go through that. We'll start with that right now. We are going to also go through a 5-year trend data information, and we do have a summary that we prepared that is a working document. I do want to preference that this is literally a snapshot in time and that these documents will constantly change over the course of the next few months. And so we are going to be collecting this information back. We're not posting things because we don't want it to get out to the public and have a wrong version out there where someone's saying, but you said this. And we're like, well, that was the very first session and this has changed through there. So we're going to kind of use this as a working opportunity to talk through and work through tonight. So I ask if you take notes, please take them on something else so that we can collect this information back. So I'd like to start off with the FY revenue. So you'll see at first, I guess I should also clarify that we're just going to be focusing on our operating budget. We're not going to be focusing on our capital, anything with that. It's really a separate budget altogether. And we have worked collaboratively with the county, and we constantly monitor that. And so we're going to save that for another evening. And we're just going to be focusing tonight on our operating budget.
Real quick question. So the county funding, since they gave extra last year, is that their new low that they have to give that this year? Or does that not change? They can choose to go back to the other number?
So that's a really good question. And typically, once they hit that threshold, it does remain the same as a maintenance of effort.
Right.
But it's going to be different this year. We're going to share with you some challenges that are coming down of how a new law is out there that we're going to talk about that could potentially reduce the overall cost of what they have to provide for us.
Okay.
And I was just going to add what the other sort of misconception that could happen there is that floor that they create. It's not the total amount that they give you that becomes the floor. They calculate it on a per pupil basis. So even though, let's say they gave us $70 million, because it was around that last year, if we would have had a decrease in student enrollment this year, there is a chance that they could have given us less money, because it's on that per pupil
Right,
basis.
good point, Matt. Thank you for that. So we're just gonna focus on today looking at our revenue, which is basically our state aid, which is calculated based on several different factors. It's calculated on enrollment, on the wealth of the actual district, on the student body demographics, meaning what students are identified as English language learners or multi-learners, this is what the new multilingual learners, what students are maybe special education, who is identified as a farm student. So those different categories actually are like, I want you to think of them like different buckets.
It's a farm student.
That's a free and reduced meal student.
Okay.
So, and thank you for asking.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
It's in your list.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Thank you for
in your
asking that
list.
list, because, for asking for that, because we do speak in,
Yeah.
in our language, and we apologize for that. But I want you to think of it in buckets. You have a bucket that's your foundation money. That's something that every single student who is enrolled and we get credit for gets. And then you have kind of these add-on buckets. So if I, as I said, if I'm special ed and a farm
The
student,
next slide.
then I'm gonna get additional money. So this is all based on enrollment, and as Dr. Kibler shared with you, our enrollment is flat. I mean, we didn't have a reduction, but we didn't really grow, and we don't anticipate growing, and there's several reasons for that. We've talked about this before. Birth rate, we've talked about, the impact of COVID, kind of the residuals from that. So there are a couple factors, but right now we're flat in our enrollment, don't anticipate. We get plenty of reports. We work with the state, we work with the county to make predictions. So think of it that way.
So my only question is, what about the communities that are doing construction right now? Like, we've added 30 students to various schools, at least in North County. I don't know what that looks like, because most of the construction on the island is 55
over.
plus. But they're leaving houses and people are buying their houses, so we don't have any anticipation of growth because of those things?
So we don't actually, because of the way that our class sizes are kind of ballooning out and coming back in. So it's an interesting thing that you have. If you look at the different classes, some classes are much larger than others, and you wonder why, right? But that's all based on birth rate and things like that. And so as you predict out, you have some larger classes leaving and some smaller classes coming in, or actually smaller classes in the middle right now. And so that's why, like right now, our enrollment in middle school is down. Eventually, that'll go to the high school, and enrollment in high school will be down. And we don't have enough coming in of heavier class sizes in pre-KK 1, 2 to be able to off-balance that. So it ends up to be a flat, if that makes sense at all.
And that you don't count the 3-year-old programs because it's a different bucket?
It's a different bucket. And 4-year-olds as well.
Question. So I know we're talking about the budget for this first upcoming year. When we talk about projections, because there is 3 new communities being built as well, how far out are we allowed to project?
10 years.
10 years.
We always
Okay.
every year we do 10 years. So we
Okay.
always constantly come back, and it's always 10 years out.
Okay.
And if I can add to that, so Mr. Barricklow under Mr. Pender's group, he works on every year, I forget the plan's name, but with my enrollment folks and his team, what is that report called? I'm sorry.
One's a comprehensive maintenance plan, and then one's the feasibility plan that ties into that.
So basically, we'll take data he knows about how communities are growing in the district, plus what our own enrollment trends look like, and kind of mesh that together to work on our own projections. And then we compare those to what the state is projecting for us, and it has to be within a 5% variance, I think, Mr. Pender?
Yes.
For every grade level.
And we work with Steve Cohen too, which is from, employed by the county, and he's part of the team as well that helps us to, look at and make sure that we're articulating every different aspect of that. So that's good. So the third slide basically is our state aid funding breakdown. And as I said, I kind of want you to think of these things as like little buckets. So you have your foundation money, you have CCR, which is your college and career readiness. So there's a certain standard that students have to meet. Once they meet that standard, they have a designation of college career ready, and then they get money attached to that. Transportation, compensatory education, concentration of poverty. So when we look at concentration of poverty, we look at our community school type of opportunities, multilingual learners, we talked about special ed, transitional supplemental instruction, you got your pre-K, your career ladder, and your blueprint coordinator. Those are the different buckets of funding that we get. And it's various calculations of how the monies are calculated within each of those. It's not as easy. The foundation money is probably the easiest to be able to calculate, but as it relates to starting to calculate some of those others, they have a lot of different variations on them. Sorry, we're gonna go through all that, but I just want to make sure that you understand like kind of all the different breakdowns there. So you'll see our fall enrollment, and you'll see that we're very flat, as we talked about it. We were up 2.75 students. You'll probably say, how do you get a part-time student? We do actually literally have a part-time student, and that adds to that variation. The next slide, I'm gonna start tag teaming this with Dr. Kibler. We have a draft summary of the state and local funding. This is a picture in time, and this is what I want to stress enormously. These are the figures that we got on Friday, on the 17th. So the governor dropped his budget on the 15th. It went out to the districts on the 16th. And then we got finalized numbers as superintendents and assistant superintendents and executive team members of this calculation. However, there's proposed legislation that has a tremendous amount of impact on our budget. And so we're going to talk through that together, but as it relates to this draft summary of the state and local funding, Dr. Kibler, will you just walk us through this, please?
Sure. So basically, the way the state calculates this is they calculate the buckets overall. So rather than looking at it as like separate state and local, they would get a per pupil amount for like foundation. So how much money you get per student for the foundation program. They take that total and then they do a proportion based on the wealth of your district to divide it up between the state government and the local government. You will notice that our proportion is roughly, we always say, and the commissioners will say, it's about 40-60. It's a little bit closer to actually, I think 38-62 if you look at it. But that's what you're seeing happen in this chart. You will notice at the bottom, the maintenance of effort, local autonomy in the local share, the second to last row. That's the place where we're recognizing the commissioners giving us over previous years above that maintenance of effort and where that has been attributed to. So that we can kind of divide it as we want.
And all of our calculations that we are working on together are not actually looking at just a maintenance of effort or just what the commissioners are expected by Comar to provide for us. What we are using is a $5 million marker over flat from last year in anticipation that that is what the commissioners will be supporting us on. Hopefully more, but that is something that I feel strongly, and as a team, as an executive team, we feel strongly that the commissioners are supporting us at a minimum of a $5 million above. So if that number were to change, that would also negatively impact our budget, but we're gonna use that as a placeholder right now because we feel that strongly enough that they have made that commitment for that $5 million above flat, even though the calculation with the new proposal of the legislation could actually mean they could give us less than last year. But we're gonna get there in just a minute. So any other comments, Dr. Kibler, on?
I don't think so,
Okay.
just unless anybody has questions.
Questions
So
on that
basically
chart.
behind this is the number of students you have per category, and then basically how much money the law says is allocated per pupil in that category. That's where these numbers come from.
Using this year's numbers, this year's enrollment numbers?
Correct. So
September 30th.
September
Okay,
30th
okay.
Which
of
impacts-
24 for the 26 budget.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So your year goes like 24, 25, so they usually will refer to that as FY 25, even though it started in 24. So those numbers from FY 25 impact your FY 26, even though they were taken in September of 24. It gets a little complicated.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one question. I know that you can't anticipate, but I know that you were saying that at certain times in the years you have an influx of kids, like by January, there's usually, how much does that affect the budget? And is there any way that It's almost like how much does that negatively impact the budget like in the year when you think about the buckets and kids? Like, are we talking 100 kids? We're talking 200 kids? We're talking 5 kids? Like,
Not 100,
No,
less than that.
I would bet it fluctuates, because you have them, students coming, students leaving. It's
Yeah.
probably within 30 either direction
Okay.
throughout the year.
And I don't know that I would say that that would have a huge budget impact because it's not like a whole class. It's not like you're adding a teacher. It
Right.
might be 2 third graders and a 5th grader and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's students that kind of probably go more the gamut. Or you might see it in one specific grade level where you do see an increase. And we have that at Mattapique Elementary School. We've had an influx, and at Graysonville for that matter. We've had specific grade levels that since we started school, they've had an influx. So the teachers unfortunately have a little bit larger sizes than the rest of their peers in the school.
Quick question on this one. So I'm looking at the summary of major state aid programs. You said that the governor has dropped his budget, approved budget, correct?
Yes,
So-
correct.
It's not approved yet.
Not
Okay,
approved,
not
no, but he's
approved,
dropped
okay.
his budget.
His budget. So is that 42, 131, 342, is that a projection off the numbers of students we have that we're gonna have from the state?
The next column is the 43.
43.5.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. So the FY 25 is this year we're
Yes.
currently in. Yeah, okay. So that's the projection.
Yeah, so the projection basically is a $1.426 million increase.
Okay.
So
And-
think about, that's a really good point. So
Right.
think about that, an increase of only $1.4 million when we
Right.
have to do, nearly $5 million just in enhancements. And that doesn't include some of the other insurance, state retirement, and things that are mandated by law for us to increase next year. And we're going to talk about that, but it's a really good point. That's a very minimal amount of money to make groundbreaking changes that this blueprint is intended to make.
And there's a bill that we're going to get into that's in the legislature right now that's going to affect that amount.
Exactly.
That'll be on the next-
Negatively.
Negatively affect that amount on the next slide.
So the question on that is typically, well, I mean, now with that legislature, we can't, know for sure. But typically, say that bill wasn't there, what is the margin of error that you typically see with that proposed budget? Is it 4%, 2%,
That's-
1? Is it typically, say you got 43 million here, do
Yeah.
you see any more than like $500,000 difference, $1 million?
Oh, so we definitely can see larger variation and.
I'm
in
just
the
wondering what the
most
swings might
Yeah,
be.
in the most subsequent years, it's really not predictable. I mean,
Right.
just
Last year
because-
was about 200,000. From January to the final approved budget in June, I believe it was like between a $200,000 and $300,000 negative impact
Negative
on us.
impact.
Okay, so it wasn't absurd amount of
Not-
swing, but it's still a good
Yeah,
chunk
that's
of
a
money.
pretty chunk,
Okay.
big
Yeah, yeah.
chunk of money for us.
I wasn't sure if it was
Yeah.
millions or whatever, but yeah.
But it
okay.
hasn't been as predictable as it was in the years past, to be honest with you. It's getting less predictable as we move forward.
Right, especially with the new legislation.
Exactly,
Right.
yeah.
And we're gonna dive into that legislation.
We're gonna do it
Okay,
right now,
perfect,
yeah.
perfect, okay.
So the proposed legislative changes are pretty significant, and they're actually pretty complicated. And I'm gonna kick it again to Dr. Kibler, because we've talked through this process a lot, and I wanna make sure that we get it right, because it's hard to understand. So I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Sure. So at our last board meeting, so that was last week, so, correct?
Yes.
We talked about, we did the Blueprint 101, and one of the things I think that we were doing as we went slide by slide, we were talking about potential legislative changes this year. And one of the potential legislative changes is delaying the collaborative time piece of Pillar 2 of the Blueprint. Pillar 2 is the diverse teachers and leaders piece. And collaborative time is in reference to getting our teachers to a 60-40 split in the amount of time that they're like standing up. This is a gross, or maybe not the best analogy, but thinking about standing up directly lecturing students, limiting that to 60% of the day, where the other 40% would be working with students on interventions, collaborative planning with other team members, data analysis, their own planning time, things like that. So nobody's really meeting that necessarily throughout the state. So it was a piece of the blueprint to get to that, and it was a phased-in piece. Well, one of the proposals in the budget, it's in the legislature right now, is to delay that, and it would reduce our foundation money by $163 per student. So it would take the per pupil funding from $9,226 down to $9,063. The issue with that is it doesn't only affect foundation. Removing that 163 from foundation is bad enough on its own, but the compensatory education amount that we receive per pupil is based on 85% of the foundation per pupil amount. So I know this gets confusing. I tried to lay it out as best I could. The multilingual learner amount is based on 98% of the foundation amount. So you can see when we went back to those, if you go back and look at those buckets, 3 of those buckets would be impacted by this legislation. We are focusing on this slide just on the state impact, because based on our conversations with the commissioners, as of right now, we wouldn't anticipate them to go down in their funding. So we are only showing you the impact this has on the state, and you can see per category what this does. And it's an overall reduction of the slide we just showed you in state money of about $1.3 million if this would go through.
That would leave us with an increase of $83,000. However,
Sure.
with our community school, we're obligated to put funds towards our community school of about $300,000
Additional that we were from what we were last year.
last year. So that would actually bring us in at less than 83,000. We would actually be in a negative of about 215
From last year.
from last year. So again, thinking that through, the impact of that, knowing that you have the cost of doing business, knowing the increases in some of our state mandated responsibilities, as well as our requirements for contractual purposes, that's going to be some concerns. So,
I just want, if I can, real quick on this. So this is a bill. It takes time for bills to move through. I'm sure council could help explain, but we'll be watching this. But what we're being told is this is one that might not get passed until the beginning of April. So we'll know how it's going, but we don't really know
So
Just basically the end of the session,
exactly.
yes.
right, which is a problem,
We need
and
to-
runs up against your budget cycle.
So basically, we just need to
And
plan
negotiation.
for this happening, basically plan for the worst and hope for the best at this
Yep,
scenario, so.
that's exactly right.
So we can basically eliminate the 13 or 1.3 out of the budget.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Make sure we're just tracking down this.
Exactly. So, this proposed legislative change on slide 7, I want to share with you where that money is actually going. So I'm sure that you've heard on the news over and over again that we're in a $3 billion deficit in the state of Maryland. So, when Matt and I first saw this, we were putting our heads together and we're like, oh, well, logically speaking, this is obviously going to go. He's reducing this so that it can go towards that $3 billion deficit, but that's not the case. Actually, what he's doing is reallocating that money at $57 million a year over the next 4 years to the Maryland State Department of Education to employ 160 new positions that will address literacy and grow your own initiatives to support the blueprint. So that's also something that as superintendents and assistant superintendents that we really have some concerns with, and that we've already started to work collaboratively together to have one voice and one message, that we just don't feel that this is the right time to be able to be pulling funding away from us and giving it to the state. That certainly, as it relates to literacy and grow your own initiatives in our individual LEAs, that we would take those responsibilities on and appropriately address them in the blueprint. So that's another thing that is concerning, that I feel like our public and our constituents and our stakeholders need to understand, that not only is the money being cut, but it's being cut for the purpose of going to MSDE to create 160 new positions.
That will probably
So-
tell us to add new programs and, okay.
Right, so
Didn't they have like a huge percentage of open positions last year? How are they gonna fill 160 more if they can't even fill the ones that are already open?
That we cannot answer.
So instead of
Good
fixing the
questions.
state budget, he's going to basically take money from the county levels, pay more state employees, and then basically try to implement more stuff with less funding. And every single county is struggling right now.
Yes.
And is this being, at the state level, is this being backed by all of our state representatives?
I don't think it is, honestly. I think that everyone's trying to just kind of wrap their heads around it right now. This is all new information that's just come out between last Friday and today, basically. And so I think it's starting to get a lot of traction out there, and I think it's gonna start going out to each LEA as they have their meetings, and I think that there's more to come to kind of position ourselves to testify in legislation, to be honest with you. So that's what the superintendents do. We testify on various bills, but this will be one that we will spend a lot of time, energy, and homework on to be able to show the negative impacts on trying to implement the blueprint. We don't believe that the blueprint is bad. We think that it has some very good characteristics, and we've seen some very positive things come out of the blueprint. Just alone, our expansion of pre-K has been amazing through the state of Maryland and should be celebrated. But this is not going to help us to continue making successes out of the blueprint.
From a legality aspect, as a county as a whole, this could be some, have we gone to the commissioners? Have we reached out to our state reps?
Which this is just happening right now, so
okay.
you guys are the kind of the first ones to get it, and then, as I said, we've had
Because as a whole, I feel like we can make a lot more noise, not taking anything
know.
from the superintendents, but
No,
as a
I
whole, I
think-
think we can make a lot more
I think
noise
we all
than
have to
just
stand tall
superintendents.
together, for
100%.
sure.
Right.
Now we have had, as I said, we had a impromptu emergency call for the superintendents, and so that we could make sure that we had all of our facts and information correct. And that's about as far as we've gotten right now, but more to come for sure, and absolutely, we felt that strong enough about it that we should put it in here. It's why wait until it becomes a law? Let's talk about it now so that we can all get out there and say how we feel that this could, potentially take us back instead of moving us forward.
Right.
Do we have the legislative number on here or the proposed bill's name that we can?
Find it, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
We don't,
that is-
we'll have it next
we'll have it.
Monday
We'll
in
get
the
it, for sure.
legislative
Yeah.
committee meeting, and
Yeah.
I'll make sure I bring it
Yeah,
and let us know.
yeah.
Because we have a meeting next Monday, the legislative committee, they will more
That was
than
gonna say,
likely
this is probably
address
gonna be
this.
your biggest topic.
And we'll get it, and we'll get that information, because they always have the bills and the numbers, and there's a link that we have, we could go,
Got some pickets
Check
and
it out.
signs if you guys want to go out front.
right? We need to,
after the,
definitely need to.
So we definitely will get that information out for
Right,
sure. So continuing to move on to slide 8, some factors that are really going to be affecting and impacting our potential 2026 budget are, as we just talked about, the potential for reductions in state funding, right? Increases in employee benefits, which are tied to their contract, salary enhancements, which are also tied to contracts. The simple cost of doing business, right? Your inflation, we've talked about this over and over again, and we're gonna take an opportunity tonight to look at that 5-year trend data so that you can see that cost of doing business and what it looks like on our accounts. And then just underfunded blueprint mandates. So even though we are getting some funding for CCR, your college and career readiness, national board certification, and things like that, we're getting like that wealth-based calculation, and it's just not enough. So for every student who has access to 4 dual enrollments through the course of a year, we get about a third of the cost of what it costs to have them take the 4 classes. So that funding is not in our budget, and we have to kind of build around it. So those types of things start to add up quickly, and what I would consider to be not unfunded, but underfunded, right? They are funded, but just not at the level that we need to be able to make sure that we can meet all of the students' needs in that particular area. And as I said, the same for like national board certification. I mean, when we first started, 5 years ago, whatever it's been now, we had maybe 25 teachers that were nationally board certified, and now we've added like basically close to 40 every year who are in the pipeline, and some of them just finished in December, so they'll be hitting next year's budget. And so those are all different things that we just have to really consider and make sure that we take into consideration as we build the budget.
So the underfunded blueprint mandates, basically the schools and the counties are being held hostage by the state. If you just don't do it, you get less funding.
That's exactly right. And in our
100%.
case, we've talked about sometimes, in some cases, the penalty is almost worth it. I know, I hate to say that because I'm a rule follower.
That was gonna be my next question.
Yeah, I'm a
Right.
total rule follower, and I want to make sure that we do things right. But honestly, when you calculate it out, because our percentages and some of those are smaller, if we didn't do it, they could pull funding from us, but that calculation wouldn't.
Right. Because at the end of the day, we have to look after our students and our people in our county.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I'm
Yeah,
assuming
but it's just
sounds
not-
like you already have the cost analysis, the weight
We
of
do,
of
but
the-
it's not the right thing to do. I mean, we want to be good stewards. We want to follow the laws and rules. I mean, we don't want to, knowingly and willingly not follow something that we should be following. So.
But if it's
I just want to
putting
put that out there.
strain on our budget and we're laying off, getting rid of positions and
We
we're
will be.
directly impacting our education, there's got to be a give and take. I understand we got to follow rules, but at
Yep.
the same time, we have to look after our children, our teachers, and our educators and our staff. And I understand what you're saying. I'm all about, hey,
Yeah.
I work for the government.
Yeah.
I've been in the military. I'm all about following the rules.
Yeah.
I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Me too.
But sometimes we have to look after our own. And
Yeah.
I have just one question real quick. On the potential reduction in state funding, and you're saying they won't make a decision until April-ish. Is there anything that we can do to impact it prior to April? Like, is this where you reach out to your local?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, could we
exactly
get a
right.
letter and get it sent up so they can start
And
sending
you
and
can reach out
emailing?
to
and-
all of our local, Steve Arntz and Hershey. You can reach out to all of them who are always extremely responsive. We actually meet with them as an Eastern Shore Superintendent Group called ESMEC. We do touch points with them through the session. They know what our priorities are. They gather information so that they can have a better understanding. So as votes come up, they can be informed voters.
So is it more about getting to them or having just the local people reaching out to them as well?
I think everybody, the
Okay,
local.
so we
reach
have-
out to
we-
them.
Everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the more that they understand the concern, and I said that this is kind of one of those things where it's like, this is a big red flag, like, we should be sounding the horns and saying, this is a problem. You're asking us to make groundbreaking changes and advancements in public education, but yet you are defunding us.
the problem is he's not even taking the money to help with the deficit of the state. He's just redoing it for the state board.
Repurposing it.
That's what I said to
That's,
Dr.
that's the worst
Salins.
part about the
It
entire
is,
thing.
it is.
Absolutely.
You would almost understand it if he said this is going to help offset the deficit.
Yeah,
But
you're like,
we're going to
okay,
hire
what
more
it's for.
people
Right.
at the State Department of Education. It's
Right.
hard to swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we shared, basically, if you go to slide 10, this, it just shows you our accounting structure, starting with 01 to 12, and that's how we track all of our information in that accounting structure. And then if you continue on in the slide, you'll see category 1, it has just an explanation of what each category is. I'm not going to read them. Certainly, actually, this part of it, Carrie can send out this part to the board members so that
This-
they can.
This is actually posted, this
Oh, this
presentation.
is- okay, gotcha. Yeah, so there you go. So if you have, take some time to read through it, and if you do have questions, feel free to reach out, but it's more of just an informational, this is how our whole budget structure is put into place for us to track spending. Okay? All right. So the next thing is the board members will receive a budget summary that will consistently be updated between now and the time that your budget is published. And so this just pulls from the actual budget itself. Or, do they need some? This just pulls from the actual budget itself, and it summarizes it by sharing with the board what are our revenues, how are they increasing or decreasing, and then part 1 is really what adjustments in your budget are you putting forward. So it actually captures everything on every single adjustment. If you don't see it in here, that means that budget line item is not changing. There's no proposals to change it, to increase it or decrease it. So if it's not on here, then it's not increasing or decreasing, it's just remaining the same. So for instance, if we had a line item for substitutes is on here, so I'm gonna narrow in on that because it's got a question mark by it. So if substitutes are on here and we have allocated $750,000 and our trend data is showing that we're spot on it and we're spending $750,000, so we have no intentions of changing that line item, it would remain at $750,000. So when you went into your budget book and you went to that line item, you would see it. Now, if we felt like we needed more money, because we're looking at trend data and we're like, oh, trend data shows that we're constantly or consistently going over by $25,000, then it would show up on this sheet and it would say that we want to increase it by $25,000. So that's kind of how this summary sheet works. So the revenue, as you see at the top, you see the state revenue, and we've talked about that, the $1.426 million. That is obviously going to be impacted by the legislation if that is to come true.
And I would just add to, Mr. Jerry, you said you would maybe lean towards going ahead and reducing that. So if that would be the direction of the board, that's why we want to do this
That's what it would
tonight.
be, exactly.
We would make that change
Yeah.
tomorrow.
And then you can see that we put a placeholder in there at $5 million above what the county provided for us last year. So the county actually provided for us $6.2 million last year. So this would be keeping that exactly what they gave us, despite any of the legal, laws changing and putting a $5 million marker on top of that. And then you would see the total,
But that hasn't been approved, right?
that has
That's
not,
just a
and will
guess.
not be approved until officially June.
So we can't count on that money. So we technically shouldn't budget for that money.
We can do that, but that's going to make it even more challenging as it relates to.
But the problem, what if they don't? That's the thing. And then we budgeted for it and then they don't give it to us. We're back in a situation where now we're $5 million in the deficit.
We could be, but we're talking right now, I mean, that would be 50 positions and that we would have to eliminate and then maybe potentially bring back, and I don't. I
So
mean,
there's
we're already-
dialogue, current dialogue.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely current dialogue for that. And I mean, and certainly the board has the opportunity to meet with the commissioners once a month. Well, two of the commissioners, I should say, once a month. Two board members get to meet with two of the commissioners so that we don't violate any laws, Adam.
I'm just
So
throwing it out there,
We
though,
could
like-
certainly have that conversation in closed session.
I know what you're saying. I understand what you're saying by like, hey, that's 50 positions you have. But we can't budget money that we don't have.
And that's fine if that's the way the board wants to
You
do
know what I
it,
mean?
then we would
Like,
move through.
I'm just throwing that out because like, we don't know if we're having that. So if we say we do, you're in a situation last year where next thing you know, we're in a budget shortfall. So I understand it's really hard. That's $5 million. Like that's, I know it's gonna be different, but we can't budget. Then if we happen
So
to
if
get
we
it,
did that, we'd be taking away all the salary enhancements and, and then, yeah.
Yeah, so let's look at that. So the salary enhancements,
Okay.
right now, we have a marker on that at about 4 million.
What does that
We don't have that
mean?
final number.
What does salary enhancements mean? Like increase, like raises? Okay.
Yeah, yep. And the fixed costs associated with those salary enhancements. And then you have your health insurance rate placeholder, which we had originally put at 7.5, but now is coming in at 10.
But before
Those
we
are-
talk about that, we have a 3-year contract with them. Those salary enhancements have to go in.
yeah, those.
We would have to look at
Yeah.
cutting other things.
So that 4 million for the salary enhancements, that's not a cost savings.
That's an
No,
increase.
it's not. It's an
That's an
increase.
increase.
Oh, yeah,
Of
an
4,000
increase.
Yeah,
Yeah.
$4 million.
Right.
Positive numbers in that column will be adding to the budget, negative values would be.
So if you,
Okay, gotcha.
right,
I'm
and if
sorry.
you, so the total unrestricted revenue, if you're taking that down to 0, which is what the board's suggesting right now, then that bottom line of 8,132,000 would increase by 6,426,000. So that's what, 14, over $14 million that we would have to,
Eliminate from the budget.
well, yeah, we'd have to eliminate from the budget in order to meet these requirements. And that doesn't include all these other things that we've listed. So we don't know what the state retirement increase is going to be. We don't know the total increase in dual enrollment, AP, materials instruction. We do know the laptop lease. We know that we're saving money on synergistic.
No,
No, but I get what you're saying, right? If we're not certain we're getting the money, we
Right.
shouldn't budget it.
Yeah. Right.
But here's where we run into it's a,
So it's
I don't know,
different
sort
for
of a short-
expenditures
it's-
and revenue though.
right, it's
Right.
sort of a shell game. If we budget at 0 and we let all those people go, what happens if we get the money? And they've moved.
That's
We
where we're
can't-
asking those questions. But at the same time, What I'm saying, you're talking about the 4 million, okay, when we talk about revenue, and I'm just backtrack real quick.
No worries.
So the 5 million's of revenue, we're getting that money in is what we're
Well-
projecting.
Well, we're
I was
asking.
gonna
Asking
say,
for
right,
it,
right,
asking for
right.
Right.
So
Well,
when
no,
you're
not
asking-
even asking for, if I can correct you, I'm sorry, because we're gonna ask for a lot more
Right,
than
right.
that.
Okay, the projection of,
I mean, I'm hoping the board
Right.
is in that position. It's the board's
So-
decision, but I would hope that the board,
but
when they
we
see the
can't, we
need, will
can't
ask for more
budget
than
for
that.
money that we know we don't have yet. Correct. When we talk about expenditures, that's slightly different because expenditures, you know you're gonna have it, you know what the salary enhance, so you can't take that to zero. We know
Right.
that's already in there.
Right.
So that's a different story.
But if we're.
But I understand what you're saying. How do we let go 50 teachers and then what if we need them back?
Right.
This is where we need to get nitty gritty and dive into this and figure it out. I mean, that's why we're all here. I got it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that we're in, it's a between a rock and a hard place right now.
Right.
Because the $5 million we don't have, and what if we don't get? And then we
Correct.
take those 50 teachers, the next thing you know, we have to let go 50 teachers. Now they have nowhere to go because it's too late. Or where do we go with this budget and how do we do it? Because then if we don't budget for it and then we need to bring back they're already gone. How do we fix this? How do we go into this? Where do we go? How do we go into the budget and make this work in other avenues? Where can we move money, or what are we allowed legally to move money to make it happen? And then
Money
if we
from
get
where?
I'm asking.
okay.
But this
I'm
is
not saying
why-
that this is, I'm asking general
And
questions.
you're,
Okay.
and you're
Right.
absolutely right, but this is why we did furloughs
Agreed.
for 4 days for
Yeah.
the entire district, so that we wouldn't lose people.
I'm well aware of that. I
Yeah,
gather
I
that,
mean-
and I know we're
And we
we're
don't
gonna probably
wanna
lose
do it.
funding. But at the end of the day, that's one thing that we should try. I'm not saying that's something you agree, but we shouldn't set a precedent moving forward that just because we did furloughs last year, that, okay,
Oh,
cool,
I
we're
agree with
gonna,
that.
we shouldn't do
Nobody
furloughs
wants
this
to.
year.
No.
That we don't wanna make this a precedent, like, okay, we have a funding problem, we're just gonna add more furloughs every.
Yeah, no, that's not.
That's not a precedent we wanna set.
How much did the furloughs,
It's about $350,000 for each day.
okay,
Just,
So in the 4 days, we save roughly 14 million dollars, or
No.
1.4 million, yeah, I'm sorry, 1.4 million, okay.
so.
And that helped with the shortfall.
Right.
Right, and so those, instead of cutting the 53 positions, we ended up we froze positions, we did furlough days, we cut things like synergistic and some other types of, like we froze the textbook line item, we cut tutors. I mean, we did a lot of things to get through in combination with those furlough days. So we still have to make that money up. That money is still not in the budget, so we have to make that up plus this deficit. So we're probably talking well over 100 positions, to be honest with you, and that's actually really challenging to do in a small district. I know that we're not the only ones. I know Baltimore County, they were online the other day, we were on a phone call, and last year they cut, do you remember, Dr. Kibler?
They cut
couple hundred.
500 positions last year, and just the $163 on its own will make them cut another 200
Yeah.
is teaching positions or everything?
across the district.
Across the board.
Really across the board. I mean, though, but, you know, obviously your certificated staff members make more. So when those positions are eliminated, it adds more to, you know, to that than it would for a support system, you know, support staff member who makes less money.
So we're talking about staff, and I understand the buckets of money. Are there infrastructure situations that are we allowed to move the money from that? I don't wanna say like, hey, let our schools just go to crap. What I'm saying is, say we need a new roof for a school,
Yeah, that's a good
can
question.
you move it there to take care of the teachers?
Yeah,
and the staff, and
that's an
then-
excellent
And then the
question.
5 million, when we get it, cool, that bucket goes back into
Yeah.
infrastructure.
No, unfortunately, that is capital, and that's what I was very distinct to share tonight, that we are only looking at our operation budget tonight. We're not mixing and mingling with capital. These two things are completely different, and those monies can't be used. And that was a big point when we went to build our new central office, which is the first central office in Queen Anne's County. A lot of community members didn't understand, why are you doing that now? That money should be going in the classrooms.
Right.
But it can't.
separate
Legally,
buckets.
it's
Is
completely
that state
separate.
funded? So when we get
No,
stuff
it's not
for-
state funded, it's county funded.
Okay, for a different pot of money.
Yes, so the
Right.
county commissioners made a decision collectively to put money into that building. Now, they bond a lot of money, and I
was
would,
talking about like
I would
fixing
kick
a
that to
school.
Sid, but.
I understand that was all approved. I was talking about like,
But
fixing a
that's-
school, like a roof on a school or a new
Same
bathroom.
thing.
But that's the
That all
same
comes from the
bucket.
same bucket.
So, but
okay.
some of that comes with state money, so a lot of
Right.
times that'll be like a 50-50 type split. And Sid, I don't wanna step on
Okay,
your
you're doing
toes,
great.
so a lot of times,
But,
like, and a lot of the projects that we do, the roofs are perfect, the tracks are a good, example. A lot of those projects, the new lights, those are all projects that are initiated, by us too, in collaboration with the commissioners. They sit down on a regular basis and say, where are the needs? They do a projection out of, fire alarm changes and storefronts and that type of thing. We look at it on a projection of years, and the county basically decides, hey, this looks like it's gonna be, can you figure this is gonna be just over $3 million to be able to do this, and then the following year, we say, here's our need, and we do a projection out, but, I mean, Sid, I didn't know if you wanna add.
So, that was a good question. It's bonded money, and really with the bonded money, you're paying money back on top of that. So they're looking at something that has like a life expectancy of 15 years or more to put that money towards that. So legally, you can't cross those two over. But the one thing we've done a good job, I think, with the county commissioners is with our capital of, they've asked for years and years and years to give us like a steady number. Like they don't want to see like a big bubble and then come back down just because of the amount of money that they're bonding. And we've been able to do that, trying to keep it steady. Of course, you're going to have your outliers, like if we get to the point with, like, say, Centerville Middle School, you're obviously going to see it jump up a huge amount, but they would like for us to keep it steady, and we try to do that, to work with them.
Right, and so because that's bonded money, it's really considered like what they would consider like a one-time money cost. And it's not something that's like reoccurring. So if you think about it that way, things that are typically reoccurring go into your operating budget. Things that are kind of more like one-time costs usually fall into capital.
Steam boiler. Sorry.
I was like, what is going on?
So is everything on this is every cost in the operating budget?
No,
Oh.
no, not at all. These
So
are only
leave the
things
things
that are
that
either gonna be
change.
increased or decreased, remember? All the
Okay.
other things that stay the same are gonna be in the budget the same exact as they were last year. So these are just things that our team already started to say, hey, what do we know is either definitely gonna increase or definitely gonna decrease?
Sorry.
Then why doesn't it show an amount in the increase?
Because we haven't gotten that far. We're just starting
Okay,
the process.
all right,
Yeah,
okay,
We're just
all right.
starting. So we just wanted to give you guys an idea of how did we even start this process? So that's a really good question.
Okay.
Yeah, this is nowhere near
was-
finished. We just
okay.
are getting, and that's why we left some spots down there because there'll be things that we'll probably likely add, but this is just the very
Yes.
beginning of what do we absolutely know is going to increase?
And the
or we
form-
absolutely know it's going to decrease.
The 4 million in the salary enhancements, those are things that they were promised in a contract.
Yes, that's a 3-year contract, and that meets what the blueprint expectation is. So the blueprint expectation is to hit the threshold of a $60,000 starting
So,
salary.
salary enhancements, that's for teacher, that's everybody?
Everybody.
Gotcha. okay.
Everybody.
And then, can I just, when everybody's looking at this, the thing to watch as we move through the coming weeks is that whatever this bottom number in the top right is as we go through, that's our increase or decrease overall in the revenue, as you spoke to. That needs to match
Yeah.
whatever we have at the bottom right for an increase, decrease.
So
you can
is
see
there a way
right
to
now-
show what needs to increase and what, I mean, like these need to change?
Yes.
So is there a way to tell what's going to increase and what's going to decrease? Or are they all?
So that's what
Most of
we're.
these are increasing.
Okay, all right.
And like, for instance, like the state retirement. Last year, the state retirement went up $800,000. We have no idea what it's gonna be. We have to wait and see what it
Is
is
there,
gonna be.
are there any decreases?
The decrease right here, percentages. but it-
Synergistics,
Yeah,
that's
Synergistic was a
400
big
and.
one, yeah.
But almost everything else would
Everything else
probably
was
be an
gonna be
increase.
increased.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
The one that we have a question mark on there in substitutes.
Oh, right, the
That right now, and I don't have an updated number, I can get it for the next time we meet on this. We were tracking really, really good in our substitute line item. So that one might actually come at the end of the year where we over budgeted that a little bit. So that would be a potential decrease on here.
Right. Or where we actually got spot on and we just remove it
And just
altogether
remove it
because it's
altogether.
not changing. So, but we've been monitoring that because our trend data showed that we were going over consistently, so we added money to that line item. And we're hoping that what we added is pretty spot on, could be a little off, so that's why we're really monitoring it very closely.
That's a, I was gonna say, so that's a question, because in one of the, maybe it was the performance audit that we got, one of the questions, Mr. Dreyer asked, why was the audit done in the first place? And part of it was done because we kept over budgeting, and then we went back and said, oh, we don't need that money anymore. How is that, how are we addressing that? Are
So-
those items that we,
So that's where the 5-year, that's actually a really good segue. Are we ready to move into the 5-year trend data?
I don't
Or do
know,
we have
does
more
anybody
questions?
I just have
more
one last
questions?
question. If we got the 5 million from the commissioners, does that mean no furloughs?
No, not necessarily.
No, that's, so if I,
Yeah,
so
go ahead, Matt.
just how this is presented right now,
Still 2
this,
million.
this has the one,
Still about 2
the
million
state
in the hole.
increase, it has the county increase of 5 million, and we are behind
1.6.
$1.6 million. And that's with all the other boxes not filled in yet.
changing? So we're already 1.6 in the hole.
I have another question. Typically, when you see a lot of this stuff come out, state, local funding, revenue, costs, state retirement, all that, when do you usually see
Sorry,
those?
can you repeat that?
Yes. When do you usually see the revenue from the state, the local government, like state retirement, all these numbers, when do they actually become a little bit more concrete?
Not on our schedule.
What about like our $800,000 or the workman's comp?
So-
When do those numbers?
Basically, well, I can speak for the liability portion of it, insurance on the buildings.
Property and
also.
liability.
So at our last MABE meeting, they're looking at probably a 15% increase in that item overall, but that is just a projection right now.
Right.
I would say probably in about another month that we'll have more of a definite answer. I know we were trying to get something from them back in December, and, basically, hey, we can give you a projection, but it's not going to be, something that is concrete. I do know that, like, our electric rates are going to be going up.
You have Delmarva?
Well,
We actually have two.
we.
No,
are-
just saying 'cause all the
Yeah, we
rates
belong
are
to,
increasing.
we actually purchased our electric from Washington Gas Electric through ESMEC and hedged that over time. But those rates are going to see a substantial increase. So I'm waiting to finalize that. Heating oil and propane, right
Through the
now,
roof.
we have pretty good prices locked in for right now. We're looking at next year's futures to see what they hold.
So-
So those are the items within like a month that I can have a more concrete.
My question was just like, not when like, what is typical that we see the concrete? I'm not saying like, do we have the, no, like, when, like, is it
in the
April that we get the
schedule.
numbers, like, in the schedule? When do we have these numbers that we can start, like, a concrete number from the state that we're gonna get the funding, a concrete number from state retirement, or where we're gonna, some of these numbers that are blank, and we need something more,
Mel, do you know the state retirement?
is it usually like April, is it March?
It's
Like, when do
normally
we?
in the spring, and it varies on when those numbers come in.
Okay.
But that's
Some
one
of
of our,
these, like, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Some of them, like your custodial supplies, safety supplies, the trash removal, pest control. A lot of those are just like, we base them on kind of like inflation. So like 3 to 4%. Accurate to,
And I think
Do we have contracts with like these pest people, the pest companies? I don't mean to say
So-
pest people, pest companies, that we have a set contract where we're like, okay, next year it's gonna go up 3% or
Yes.
in the, like an escalation.
Yes, but what you'll see in the area I oversee, I have the 6-year of what was actually budgeted, what the actuals were. So you'll see in quite a few years, when the times get tough, areas that I kind of oversee end up getting cut. And I'm going to be over budget in certain areas. Like for like instance, water and sewer was $300,000 for the past 5 years, until last year, we actually bumped it up to where we're, in line with where we should be. So those are some of the hurdles that we're facing that, okay, you come down, we go to, here's a budget, where can we cut from? A lot of those areas have never been increased, but I know what the projections are, and I know what the contract is, some of it may be $5,000 to get us back in alignment with it. Some of it may be $25,000. So, but we do have contracts with that. I can tell you another big hit we took was with the lead testing. With every school having to have every single water source tested for lead, that, has really rocked our budget. And again, you might be talking $15,000 extra, but that's $15,000, that was not accounted for, so. But we do have contracts for all of that.
That's all
yes.
accounted for now, though, correct? That's all put into budgeting now.
Well, that's what we have to do. What increase are we gonna do this year
Okay.
based on this 5-year trend?
So is that lead testing every year, every month?
No, that lead testing is, I believe it's every 3 years. But then you have to go back, and some of the ones that have failed, you have to have a remediation plan for what are you doing to fix that?
Right.
So does that come out of your maintenance budget, or does that come out of, the testing area? Those are areas that we try to look at. When we spread things out, we try to look at it basically in a 7 to 8 year cycle of what we can replace and what we can do, for those. I know we can't replace every water fountain, at one time. So what can we do this year? What can we do next year with that kind of plan?
So since we're on the lead testing, I'm assuming since you've discussed it, we had a couple failures in the lead testing.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Well,
And the reason I say that-
The rules
But what
also
I'm saying-
changed, and you may want to address that.
right.
Yeah.
So my next question was, what is the timeline on fixing those, legally speaking, from if we fail a test, how long is the timeline
So-
to fix that or remedy that situation? Because at that point in time, we should already know the timeline, so we should know what the cost is to fix it.
Yep.
So we should be able to build that in there without having projections, correct?
Correct. So we just actually went through the second testing of the ones that failed.
Okay.
You get a second chance for that. And now we're looking at that data to see, okay, which ones went through and passed, which ones didn't, to build upon that budget for that. And to back up on the lead of water testing, like, they lowered, like, the percentage down to a small amount. A lot of the ones that were like, hey, I'm just using this as an example, you may have a sink in a back room that nobody ever uses that has a water fountain attached to it. And, that was tested. Okay, do we really need that? Can we put a sign on there, which we've done,
Or just
which the
remove it?
state allows? Okay,
Right.
well, that's a cost saving part there, just the sign applied to it, the placard. So, yeah, it's a moving target, but the results we're getting back now, a lot of them, passed the second time. So, but again, there's some that we still need to replenish the faucet, because I'm pretty confident that's where the issue is.
So it's been single faucets, not like an entire school itself where it's like the water supply systems got the lead. It's
That-
being singular point of use situations. Is that what I'm gathering?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So it's something as simple as a single sink in a boys' or men's restroom had lead, but 3 sinks down did not.
Yeah. And again, when you do the water flush, you're supposed to do it, okay, so was the water flush done ahead of time? Has it been sitting there? When we did the testing this year, a lot of them had sat there over the summertime. So, of course, you're gonna have that residual buildup. But, yes, it may be one, or we do see some schools where, hey, maybe, like I said, it is the faucet, and let's go to the faucet route of it.
Okay. I was just asking because if it's a supply issue,
Okay.
that should be taken up the chain, not typically. If you're seeing an entire school with a supply situation, that's a situation with the county, correct?
Yes.
That wouldn't be
Yeah,
something
no,
with
it's not a
us.
supply issue.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so provided for you is all of our accounts that you can see them by category and the actual account numbers, as well as from FY '20, which would have been the 19-20 school year, all the way through to FY '24, which is the 23-24 school year, with a 5-year average, and then what was budgeted for 2025, which is this current year. So I'm gonna again kick it to Matt if he wants to share any specific information. I do know that, as we looked at these, Mr. Pinder noticed that some of his 5-year trend data, he didn't believe were 100% accurate, and felt like maybe some things had not been charged adequately to different accounts And that's likely because of some turnover that we've had. So meaning that it was charged, but it just doesn't charge to the right account. And so, you know, sometimes that does happen if someone doesn't have the knowledge base of traditional, you know, institutional knowledge of what goes where. Sometimes that might happen, but Dr. Kibler, did you want to jump in at any
Yeah,
time?
I think just to kind of explain what you're looking at, how it's organized, so not getting into any numbers. So this document is organized according to the accounting structure that was back in the PowerPoint. So your different, the different buckets we have to account for. So like category 1 is administration. So if you go back to the PowerPoint, it's slide 10 on the PowerPoint. So like the front page is basically the breakdown in administration. And what you'll see through all of those is that all 12 of them have salary and wages, contracted services, supplies and materials, other charges. And some of them have others, but you work through that through all 12 categories. And what you'll notice,
Can you please?
Yeah.
I'll just make sure, if I was gonna make notes.
I don't have a problem with that. It's,
Okay.
yeah. So just for an example to walk through one, let's go to let's go to 11. It's, maintenance of plant. So it's just a couple pages back or whatever, just as Dr. Kibler was sharing. In maintenance of plant, which is category 11, you'll see salaries and wages, and then you'll see contracted services, and then you'll see supplies and materials, and all those, just like in any other, of the other categories. What you'll notice too is that some of the salaries that, for instance, an executive team member would be spread over several different categories. So here you'll see that part of the director, supervisor, and COO position is actually one part. There's more that you would have to add up to get to that total salary base. Because it's taken out of different categories, because his roles and responsibilities are reflected in different categories. So that's why you have to take it out of different categories. But you also see like contracted services. I know you've been asking about what kinds of contracts do we have? Rental equipment, you know, repairs, trash removal, pest control. Those are all the different, you know, environmental testing. And a lot of those
Just
categories.
that category.
Or just that category. And a lot of those you'll see are showing up, especially in category 11, in our summary page that will be increased, because a lot of the things that Mr. Pinder works with have an increase for the cost of doing business. And a lot of times, even from mileage to things like that, that may change at the state level, also get impacted here in our budget as well. Some things that we don't necessarily have control over, that inflation piece or the piece from the state that says, hey, you know, now mileage is going to be reimbursed at X rate. We have to adopt that. We don't have a choice. So that line item might go up, and that's not necessarily something that we can control.
And that actually trickles down from the federal government.
It does. It trickles down from the federal
So
government.
question,
Thank you.
you have here 1,003 here, director, supervisor, CEO. Is that all the same person, or is that 3 different people in this scenario?
In this scenario, that's one person,
Okay, I would think you had split
right?
them.
Matt?
The 1,003, because you said it's split in different
It is,
buckets.
so it would
I
be-
wasn't sure if that director, it was all the singular person, or if that's 3 different people that you've lumped in that same.
Right, isn't that one?
Section 11 maintenance.
I would
plan.
have, for that one,
Got that one.
I would have to
But like you
verify.
can see in 1005 right under it, that is a combination, right?
Because I see supervisor, but then I see 3 different people. I was
But
just-
I will say, what this doesn't have on it, which the budget book does, the budget book provides an FTE column, so you would be
Know
able to
how
tell.
many
I
people.
can't
Yeah,
tell. I'm sorry, I can't tell
That was
right
probably
now.
a poor example. Let's
But-
go back to
Can we request the budget book copy?
You should have, I
have
thought,
it.
if you didn't have it, I'm sorry. I thought you guys had one
Yeah,
of
we
the
can
current years.
absolutely get that.
Yeah, we will get you a copy of that for sure.
Perfect, thank
So
you.
let me go to one that's a little bit different when you go to, let me find a better example for you.
It might.
I'll make sure I thought you had one. This is the.
Okay, so if you go into category 2, which is mid-level administration, you'll see a line item of 1006, which is principals. So that line item includes all people who are designated as a principal. So I'm just on page 1, 2,
Guess we
3,
should have
4.
put page numbers on this, sorry.
Yeah, page number 4, at the top, it says, category 02, mid-level administration. And if you go down to like 1006, you'll see principal. That encompasses all the principals. If you go to 007, that's all of your assistant principals. Does that make sense?
What?
And see, in your budget book, it would say how many there are.
It would have a number. And I do want to, since you went there, so there's a large jump in the 22 to 23 fiscal year there for the assistant principal. I think that's come up in the community. I think it might have come up at our meeting last week.
Yeah.
That reflects a district decision where we converted teacher specialist positions at every elementary and middle school, or excuse me, at every elementary school,
elementary
sorry, I
school, 8.
misspoke, to assistant principals. So those 8 positions came out of the teacher, the instructional salaries, and went up into the assistant principals. So instead of 10-month employees, 12-month employees that could help, that can discipline and things like that.
Evaluate.
So it wasn't just that we just added, we converted those positions. And in a lot of ways, those teacher specialists there was kind of similar duties. So.
Very
Where
similar.
do we see that difference in teacher specialists? Just so I'm tracking.
It's gonna be harder because you've got so many people
teachers.
in teachers in general, but it would be under instruction, like 2 pages later, 3 pages later.
Category 03 to 05.
And it's hard to notice, but if you look from like 22 to 23, that 28.7 million up to 29.7 million, you can't really see it going down because they had salary enhancements in there. I don't have enough, I'm sorry, I don't have a better way.
1211 goes from 730 to 183 for the teacher specialist. That's probably where.
Oh, right, yeah. you
Oh,
see
that's an
that.
even better, thanks.
Yep, that's a good call there, yeah.
What's the second?
Yeah, so
So if you
1211,
look,
1212.
if you look, see how in
1213.
23 it went down 730 down to 183. It's reflecting that change.
And that was how many? 9, 8?
So we had 8 altogether.
Eight
We did it
elementary
over,
schools?
we did it over a 3-year period too. We didn't do it
And it was
all
just
at
at
one time.
elementary?
Just elementary, 8 elementary, teacher specialists, not reading specialists, not math specialists, but teacher specialists. So 8 of them over a 3-year period.
And it's because they
Converted
did
from
not-
that to an
Converted from a
assistant.
teacher.
Because they didn't have
specialist
any. It wasn't adding an additional assistant principal
They
at those
didn't have any
schools. They had
assistant
one
principals.
administrator.
And what is the benefit of having an additional principal or assistant principal?
So I think there's a lot of, so you have a 10-month employee move. It's a bigger bang for your buck. So you have this 10-month employee, and for a very small amount of money, we can make them a 12-month employee, and then they can do things like evaluation of staff, they can do discipline of staff. And they can be a designee for the principal. If the principal's out of the building, they have a legal designee that can do pretty much anything that they can do.
And that's better in the elementary schools versus middle or high?
Well, the
Or
middle high school, it already was there, so it just
Gotcha.
didn't have it in the elementary school. And it really, in a long-term effect, really builds that opportunity for your next level of principals. So now we have, 8 additional people in the district that are really being trained to be principals. So as our principals, like Teresa Farnell, start to retire, or Louisa Welsh start to retire, we have this good group of people that have experience of really being number 2 in charge and can successfully become principals. So it's a little
Succession
breeding
planning.
ground too. I mean, it has all kinds of benefits, but that's just another added benefit.
So I feel like it's a complicated question. One of my problems or pet peeves is when we bring items for approval from the board. I'm looking at one from last week and it says $211,000 local FY25 CIP funds. That might not be a good one because that might be construction type monies, but where would I tag that to based on these numbers? Because we get a monthly summary where we see we're either 100% spent, 87% spent. If I were to take those numbers and I'm looking at the local CIP funds, how do I match them up so that when we get to, because a lot of questions that we already have is, how come this department is 110% spent or only 58% spent? How do I tag that or make it match over so that I can see that we actually did have that money and we're tracking it correctly?
Yeah, that one's gonna be a little more challenging because it is a capital.
I knew
So
I
that's
grabbed the
gonna-
wrong
yeah,
one.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that one's gonna be a little bit more, but
I can
Yeah,
give
go
some
ahead.
examples.
Yeah.
So like, we won't bring it until June. But when we go to like re-up the Power School contract, like the
Yes.
student information system, we would be able to tell you like where within the budget book that falls and things
Okay.
like that. So that, and really the best way that we have right now is by looking through your budget book and each of the like little subcategories, they have explanations of what is in there.
Okay. All right. Because that's just one of the things that sort of, we hear all the time, everybody wants us to be more transparent in our budget and have people be able to see where we're spending our money. If there's a way to sort of tie them together. Because some people do actually go out to our web pages. They look at what's out there on the budget. They do have some questions and I can't always answer them if I get those questions.
So like I look at like travel, homebound.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we are tracking our
It's like sending a student
grants?
or whatever.
Yes, that we have one dedicated staff member that's 100% of her job is she tracks
Grant?
all of our grants.
Okay,
Chrissy, she is wonderful and
A rock star.
a rock star. And she tracks every single, from the smallest teeny tiny grant to your largest title grants and everything.
She
gets
tracks
tracked.
getting them and how they're dispersed and,
So the supervisor is the one who like will apply for the grant typically, and go through the whole process, in collaboration with her. And there's a series of things that you have to do. You have to do like what's called a C-125, which is categorized of how you're gonna be spending the money. So if you have $1 million, how much of it's gonna be in contracted services, how much is gonna be in personnel, how much, you know what I mean? So it does all that, it has to go up and get approval. There has to be an assurance that's signed by me. There's also has to be a budget description page that says exactly how you're gonna be spending the monies. They have checkpoints in the state where throughout the year, they have to report on what percentage of the money has been spent to date. Are there any changes or modifications that need to be made to the budget? And Chrissy coordinates all that and ensures, gets copies and ensures that we are complying with all of those deadlines. But our supervisors are amazing and they do a fantastic job of doing it. So it's a really good partnership between them. But we have quite a bit of monies that come through grant-wise.
Is there a way to see in the budget what money comes from grants? Like, for different positions or different?
I might have to defer to Dr. Kibler on that. Dr. Kibler, they're asking about specific grants. So if we have a Title I grant, is that reflected here of how many staff members are actually paid through Title I grant funds?
That is not in
here,
this.
but we do have on the C-125, it would be articulated of how many staff members, so. Yeah, and that's something.
And are grants counted in, anywhere else, like in our budget? Like, do we show how much money we get from grants each year?
So the grants are all in the budget book are all reflected on page 7 of the budget book. That has the restricted, and I believe there's in another place as well in there.
budget books?
I don't think so. These are, I just asked Carrie to go down and see if she could find some, to share, but no, these are all, those are our,
That's it.
Check your desk, there might be one in there, but.
what are we looking for?
The budget book.
Oh, she's
oh, there she
got 'em.
got them.
Thank you. Oh, you have one in your desk.
So you wanna make sure you got the one, the most recent one?
Thank you.
Yeah, put that in our shred pile.
Noted.
And what page did you say, Dr. Kibler?
Restricted funds.
It's under restricted funds.
I tell you, it doesn't have a lot of detail. It never has. This is
Page 6.
Before us, page 7.
These are ours.
Yes. So if you look at the federal,
Gotcha.
6 and 7, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So just to ask a question, because, we're still learning. One of the spots of contention was the group that went to training on grant, is that captured, reported? How do we account for stuff like that? Is that included in any of our budgetary items? And
As a whole, it's captured in the restricted funds, but individually speaking, we have many different title grants. So each one of those is actually a separate grant award. It's called, actually, we always wait on the NOGA, the Notice of Grant Award. Once we get the NOGA, then we know that we are entitled to spend the money. Sometimes those NOGAs come in November, December, later than we had anticipated, but each grant has its own, as I said, it's a completely separate grant in one aspect of the application, the monitoring of the grant, the C-125, which is how you're spending it, and the maintenance of it, to where the check-in points and when they're due to the state, and saying exactly what I just said, like what percentage to date has it been spent out? Are you on target to spend it out? If you're not, is there any amendment that needs to be done? And you have to remember too, that these grants all overlap. They're typically 18-month grants. So outside of that, just traditional 12-month opportunity. So they overlap in that aspect. So you could potentially have 3 different grants, like Title I grants all at the same time that are
Right.
overlapping. One's concluding,
Right.
one's almost finished, and the next one's just beginning type of thing. And that's what we were talking about the other evening, that some of these funds that have to be spent out, but it's because the grant is coming to the end of its life.
And you have to spend it
And-
before we.
And if your grant is 18 months and you have to write it 8 months before that, then just think about where you are. You're well over a year,
Into it.
almost 2 years into it. And so obviously what you thought was going to happen may be tweaked a little bit. So you might not have as many staff members who participated in a professional development opportunity. So say you had a contracted service to do professional development for, 38 teachers, but it ended up to only be 28 teachers. So then you now have monies left over. So then it's like, okay, we're gonna do a budget amendment so we can spend these monies in a different way. And then that's how so we continuously are amending, doing, spending, amending, till the budget is completely spent out. And in some cases, like the one that wasn't approved, we won't be able to spend that money, so it'll go back to the state and we just send them the yellow sheet and the expectation that we tried to, but we couldn't, and now the money will be returned to them. It goes back in their kitty, and then they decide how they distribute it, based on, the title grants based on the federal law.
Right.
But how do grants show up in the overall budget? I guess that's what I don't.
Not in this operating budget, they won't show up
They
in
do,
that.
okay.
Because it's
Those would
not
be ancillary.
technically the money that we can 100% absolutely count on.
That's exactly
Because
right.
it's a grant, you have to apply for them and get them.
Okay.
And even though a lot of those grants are wealth-based or funded on calculations that we know we're going to get something, a lot of times those calculations change from year to year
Based on the students.
based on student enrollment or based on the wealth of the district. And so sometimes those numbers, even though we know we're gonna get Title I monies, sometimes we don't know exactly how much. So you can't necessarily, it's not good practice to necessarily tie a lot of positions to grants, because what if the grant goes away or is no longer funded? And we do have some of our positions that are tied to grants.
I was gonna add, that has actually been a reason that we have had a surplus at the end of the year, is the positions specifically with like Title I. If we were a district that had millions and millions in a fund balance, maybe we would go ahead and float money to hire positions that we put into Title I, assuming if we got our notice of grant award in the middle of the year, we could just pay ourselves back. We have not been in a position to do that, so we write for a position, but like we're just getting notice of grant awards for like Title I, like we just got it today for fiscal year 25. It is the 7th month of fiscal 25 right now. So if we put a position, that's already 7 months into the year. We would just post that right now, and that's how you end up with a
And
surplus in
that's
those
exactly
grants.
right. So then therefore, now we have to do an amendment to that, and then we have to spend those monies in a different manner. And you can see how that gets cyclical. Last year, and actually the year previous to that, in the transition that the state level had between the last 3 superintendents, we have not been getting our notice of grant awards until well after December. And so they are challenging because half of the year has gone by, and we know we're gonna have money left over in there. So we all have to start thinking about, what does that look like? How do we spend that money?
Is that for a singular position, or say we're halfway through the year, say I'm throwing random numbers. You get $20,000, but we know it costs for an individual for 1 year, 20 grand for the entire year to be a Title I funded tutor. Just throwing
Right.
random numbers out there. But we're halfway through the year, so you know that it's going to take $10,000. Can then you bring in 2 tutors for the second half of the year?
We'd have to do a budget amendment, but yes, and the budget amendment process is pretty intense. They make it kind of difficult, so it might take us 2 or 3 months to get a budget amendment through, believe it or not. And
So you still got money left over.
exactly, it is challenging, and it's always been that way. I mean, this is not, it's been more challenging recently than
Does
it
that
has
carry
been.
over?
As I said, those are 18-month grants
18
typically,
months.
and so
But
you just
can
have to
use that
watch your
same- The
timeline.
same individual, say you get it approved today, you actually have well into the following year, so you have a tutor for the rest of this year, and then
Potentially some
speaking,
months, some
well, if
months.
it's 18 months, you're gonna cover, if you have half the year that now, you're pretty much, you're gonna cover the entire next year, next school
You're
year.
talking calendar year,
Yeah.
not school year.
18 months, calendar year.
It's an 18-month grant, but I think it would be backdated. It wouldn't,
Is
it
it
wouldn't
backdated?
start, it
Definitely
wouldn't start
backdated.
from the time you
Okay.
got the money.
So that
It's
changes
backdated,
it, so if it was dated for today at 18 months, that's the rest of this year and next year.
And then,
So it would cover.
and I really appreciate your point. And what we also run into is if the title grants go down, we go ahead and bring those people in, and then you end up with layoffs.
Right.
do.
Yeah, tracking, I understand.
Yes, and so last year, for example, in the Title I front, the schools wanted to add behavior specialists, and great plan, didn't get the notice of grant award until, I think it was January last year, don't quote me on the exact time, but, so our schools were waiting on those positions, and only, I think, 2 of the 3 schools were able to get one right away. So we wrote it back in this year, and they're all up and running with it right now, but that's that dance with it, it's difficult.
So I know it looks bad because we lay off, but when we hire these individuals on Title I funds, are they well aware of, hey, this is funds that are
It's actually posted like that.
strictly for a year?
No, it's not
No,
posted
it's-
like that. It's
posted that
posted
this
as
is
a
a-
grant-funded position.
Yeah.
A grant funded position, but you can't give them like a timeline. This is
No.
a year by year basis, or you can't do that?
It depends on the grant, but all of our grant positions are posted as, this is a grant-funded position contingent on securing continuing funding.
Okay. So in other words, when they say you're laying off more people, I mean, that kind of,
Right, and that's what happened.
that's a misconception we're getting as well.
And that happened a lot with our leads money. We got a lot of leads money. We had a lot of positions that were attached to the leads money. Those positions, they knew that they were temporary, for lack of better words, they were temporary. We knew that the funds, it wasn't like Title I where you pretty much, it's every year you get it. As long as I've ever known, we've always gotten title funds based on your school population. But leads money, we knew was a designated period of time, and when the money was gone, the money was gone. And so we hired several. I can give you a perfect example. We hired 18, Michael, permanent subs, Dr. Q. No, 18 permanent subs. And let me tell you, when those permanent subs were gone, we got beat up. We got beat up hard because they were so valuable. I get that. But at the same time, we knew that that was money that was used for a short period of time. And we knew that there was going to be an end date, which we called the cliff. And there was also some ESSER funds that we used to put in some social workers, school social workers and things
Some
like
of
that.
the nurses.
Yeah, and so, yeah, it's a good point that it's really easy to say, but then the community doesn't necessarily understand that. And it's rightfully so because they become part of your community, part of your fabric of your school district. And our permanent subs were very invaluable, and the schools relied on them. And to just not be able to fund any of them because they were cut out of a grant is very challenging.
So moving forward and trying to build transparency with the board and the community and everybody. So when we get funding, not to get into names and all that kind of stuff, but are we able to be like, hey, we were able to secure, or we got leads funding, so we were able to hire 18 substitute positions, but we want to just let the community know we're bringing folks in for this, but there is a term limit, there's an end date.
I
Because
feel like we said that at
Okay.
probably 10 board meetings.
I will tell you
I mean, we
that
talked
from
about
the
the
moment,
cliff.
my very first moment on this board, the CFO, the superintendent,
Okay.
that it was noted at every flippin' meeting.
We actually
that
had
we
just
have-
ESSER and
Yes.
leads money, like,
expire.
Yeah, no, we just had the sheets that
But
we
we know
gave you, account
a
monies that
small
say, here, this is
minutia
how
of the
much, yeah.
of the population Washington. But I'm just throwing that.
Exactly, and
I'm
then we
asking-
do.
It's a question, I'm just
We
asking.
do board minutes.
Right.
Mrs. Dennis does a very nice job with creating board minutes. It has all the links, so you don't have to read the whole thing. You can just go to where your interest lies. So we do that, and that goes out to everyone. And actually, our community can go online to our page, and they can actually link up, and they could get it, even if they're don't have a student in the school. If they just want information on the school district in and of itself, they can actually sign up for every one of our news releases. So, that's something that people can read that information to be more informed, and not just have to feel like they have to sit through a board meeting.
Can I just ask one question? What are the three biggest things that, fast forward a year from now, that would help get us out of this? Obviously, I hear the blueprint, obviously, like when I'm looking at the line items, like I'm looking at salary enhancements and things like that. But like, will we continue to be in this cycle until something like big happens, or increase state revenue, or decreasing the requirements of the blueprint? Like, what's the long-term plan to get out of this?
Great question.
Like, what are three big things? Because I like,
You need money.
yeah, no, I get that. I mean, big time. But I'm saying, like, what's like, you know, they always say you can't eat an elephant all at once. Like, what's one of the biggest things that we could tackle? And I'm not saying because it's going to happen overnight, but like, what's one of the biggest things that we could lean towards to try and, like, is it like, I don't want to do this for year after year after year, because I can see where it's happening.
I said we don't wanna
But it's like
set a
we're a dog
precedent
chasing our
going
tail
further.
at this point. So
We
like,
don't want to do any more
Yeah.
furloughs. He's
that's what I'm saying. So like,
Precedent
what
to keep
could,
going down the same hole.
what
I
if we
agree.
keep going down? It's like the definition of insanity. But I see the numbers. I'm not arguing with the numbers, and then it's just not there. But it's like, what can we do to like? I guess I just want to know, like, okay, great. This is what we have to do right now to stop the bleeding. But like, what's the long-term plan? And even if it's not the plan, what are the micro steps to get to the plan? I'm not an accountant, so like, I'm asking because I feel like it's a very real question of like, what can we do? And if it's a matter of, you know, I can get my head around how they possibly might reduce, you know, the state funding because of the thing that's being voted on. Like, that makes sense to me. And if the community and us can get involved with trying to talk to our legislators to try and stop that, cool, that's a plan. I'm just thinking, what are things like that we could do to really impact a couple different things that would help bring more money into the county?
Well, one thing is that consistently our insurance has gone up every single year, basically 8%. Maybe slightly less, like 7.5, maybe slightly more, like 10 this year.
this health
but
insurance
Health
or-
insurance. And our employees have the best health insurance in the state of Maryland because of, not only is it a great plan, but their percentage that they pay is a lot less than some of our colleagues throughout the state. So we put in a new partnership with Marathon Health, and that is an ability for us to fix costs for healthcare. And so the more people that we have that are successfully using Marathon Health, the more we'll be able to predict and then control costs. Not control meaning not for them to continue to go up. They're not going to reduce them. We know that's not going to ever happen, right? We know that.
Put the brakes on it a
But
bit.
it's going to put the brakes on it. That is, and we're at about 25% right now. We need to get to more like 35%. We're also looking at adding more partners on, because we do partner right now with the county. I don't know if you know that or not, but we do participate with the county in that. So that's one thing, is to continuously grow that opportunity that's exclusive for our employees, which is a huge benefit because they don't pay any co-pays. And so we have employees who don't pay anything for their insurance because they are an individual. And up until last year, our individuals didn't have to pay anything towards their premium. And if they utilize Everside, they have no copay. So I don't know what other organization you could go where you would get that benefit. That's a very good benefit. So trying to control that, right? That's one thing we can do. Another thing is that the blueprint, the initiatives within the blueprint just have to be funded at a higher level. That's the bottom line. The state has to come off, and if we go back, and I encourage every board member to review, one of our commissioners took the time to really talk about the blueprint, talk about the history of the blueprint, And I believe that Carrie, Mrs. Dennis, sent out the link to the board members. I encourage you to go back and listen to that over and over again, because he does an amazing job of articulating what the blueprint and funding promised us and what we're actually getting. And what they promised us is very far off from what we're getting. And if they gave us what they promised us, we wouldn't be in this position right now.
I guess it's like, I just look at it from, I just don't want to see the teachers consistently getting the short end of the massive stick. Like
And I ask you that, what are they getting the short end of? Because their salary enhancement package is incredible, and so is their benefit package. So are you referring to class sizes?
For certain schools, I think certain schools' class sizes, I do think that, from, again, not a teacher, based on what I'm hearing from them, it's like, I guess when they got their contracted amount and then the furloughs, it basically, they didn't get it. So it was like they didn't get the raise or the step or the increase that they were hoping to get.
And we can share specific, we can share with you, like we have them. We can take a 5-year teacher, a 10-year teacher, and a 20-year teacher and offer that to you, and that's not accurate. So we can provide that
I would love
so
to
that
see
you
that.
actually have that information. Did they get what they would have without the furloughs? Obviously not, right? Because furloughs took away from them. But did they make more money than they did last year? Yes.
So they did
we
get an
can-
increase.
They did.
Okay.
They did. And I can, as I said, we have that information at a 5-year, 10, I think we did
Yeah,
5, 10, and 20.
Admittedly, the ones that didn't see much of an increase at all were the folks that were at the top of the scale that didn't get a step increase because of the furloughs. But other folks lower on the scale, they would have got it.
What was the average increase? Was it based on their current pay, or was it bringing them all to a flat? I don't know if I'm wording
So
that
with,
correctly.
I think, I'd have to go, I haven't looked at that actual number, but I think the average, like a teacher that's kind of in the middle of their scale, around $75,000 salary, I think the raise last year with STEP and the cost of living adjustment prior to the furlough was somewhere around a 6.5% increase.
Yes,
Does that
it
sound about
was.
right?
That's
Dr.
right.
Knoll?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
a six, so if you do about, well, I mean, we could, I could, if you want me to
Right.
crunch the
Good.
number, I
4,000.
could, but it is an increase, for everyone.
And in the commercial world, it's 3.5% to 4%, not 6%.
Yes.
Had they
6.5 to
gotten one
6.5.
before, like, did they get one every
Getting
year?
one every year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
They're
there's
getting
been
steps.
2 years in the history that we could go back and look where they did not get a step. But subsequently, not since I've been here, but subsequently, they made up one, I believe, of those 2 steps. But as I said, that's like a long history of negotiating with our bargaining units.
I guess my fear as a parent, I worry that this is going to negatively impact, not selfishly, but like the kids. Like, I just don't want there to be that where there is 30 kids in a class and things like that, because I know that does have an impact on them. And I don't know how teachers do it.
And
I can't deal with my own 2 children half the time, so.
I can share with you too, you can go right online and we can give it to you, where you can go compare and see salary basis for every single district in the state of Maryland. And you can actually see where our teachers fall.
I would love to
And I think
see
you
that.
would be very impressed of where we are.
And again, you only hear the information that's given to you, and I don't necessarily know where to do a deep dive to find that, but I would love to see that, because I really don't know how they get their increases and how, from what I have understood, was they got a step and then they didn't get it with the furloughs. And I just was like, oh, that's a raw deal.
But there was the entire district that was
But
furloughed.
I understand that by doing that, they prevented losing teachers, right? Like, they all took the hit collectively, which.
Yeah, staff members, and actually at
From
that point, it
Dr.
wouldn't have been
Salen's all
teachers,
the
it
way
would have
down.
been our support staff.
Say that again?
So at that point, it wouldn't have been, because of the notification of when we got the information of our funding base, because it's so late, there's a contractual responsibility where a teacher, you can't furlough a teacher after a specific time frame. So because that time frame had lapsed, the only people that we could have furloughed would have been, not furloughed, riffed. The only people that we could have rifted would have been our support staff. And if you think about that, that has twice the impact because of salary differentials from what our teachers make, our CERT staff makes compared to what our support staff makes. So essentially, it's nearly a 2-for-1 rough numbers, when you're making up funding for that.
So if we already know we're going into the next year and there's going to be a shortfall, are we looking at potentially the same thing as this year with furlough days?
I think
Versus cutting positions,
I think-
We
or?
have to talk about that as a board.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
And we make that
in the
decision.
presentation, I think I listed out some of the things that we were thinking, increase of.
I don't think we listed them,
Oh, we
Dr.
didn't
Salins,
list
we
them.
were just gonna talk.
We were talking about them. So yes, I mean, you have to think about it. And, lifting, staff members absolutely is going to be on the table. Looking at every opportunity to, to cut things, like you suggested, like our synergistic and things like that.
I wanted to go back, if I could, to Mrs. Eichler's one question about when does this stop
Oh,
looking
sure.
forward?
Yeah.
And I hope that you all, and I hope people watching hear this whole comment, because I don't think it's going to be necessarily popular, but like, when we put the budget summary together and we are sitting down to contract negotiations, in a normal year, you would be working with the associations to look at what are fair increases for the employees that work with us that we can appropriately give them and agree to within the confines of what the state and local government are planning to give us in our budget for the following years, right? That would be normal. So the commissioners are going to give us $5 million next year. So how do we work all of the increase as we're negotiating? We had an outside influence because of the blueprint. They told us we had to get to $60,000. We had a floor we had to get to.
Which was 18% over 3 years. So
And
as
that-
teachers, they're getting an 18%. Not
What's
support
the
staff,
starting for a
not
teacher?
60,000.
No, before the blueprint, sorry.
53, I guess we were at, or
Right, it was-
52, I guess
yeah.
we were at, 52 something, 52.4 maybe, don't quote me on that.
Right around the 50.
Yeah, we were right around the 52 mark.
And that is not,
That's in this county, but that's not in other counties.
and that mandate in the law is, that's the law saying, we don't care what the state allocation to your school system is. We don't care what the local county government is going to agree to give you. You are going to get your teachers to that point. And please understand, I'm not here saying that nobody deserves that
Oh,
amount.
absolutely not.
They deserve more.
But I'm telling you, when you talk about the underfunded blueprint mandates, that is an extreme.
Right. And I just, 18% over 3 years, that's wonderful. We all agree that they deserve it. But also the law leaves out any of your administrators and any of your support staff. But we, as a district, and sitting across the table in negotiations, believe that our support staff and our administrator are just as important as our teachers are. And so you have to, the system also has to absorb that, right? Because you don't want to leave someone behind, especially as it relates to gaps. So if you leave your administrators behind and they don't get the same rate, so say administrators got 1% or 2% and teachers got 18%, then here's what happens. The teachers come up to the administrators, so now the teachers are making more than the administrators are making when it comes to a per diem. So our administrators work 12 months, our teachers work 10 months, 189 days. So then they're making per diem more than your assistant principals or young principals. So that becomes a challenge, right, for recruiting. And so I think there's a lot of dynamics to this. There's a lot of tentacles, as we say, that we have to really consider all of the factors. No one's saying that they don't deserve it. We support our teachers and they do an amazing job. But it's the first time in my career that a law has mandated negotiations. Usually when you sit at the table for negotiations, you come to the table with the concept of what can we afford? We were forced to enter into something that we didn't know that we could afford. And as it relates to furloughs, that's a one-time thing. That 6.5% increase will stay with them we'll build upon that. So that's only gonna grow from year to year as they move in. So they got 6.5% this year. Okay, they didn't really see all of that money right in their pocket, but next year that 6.5% is still there. I still gotta pay for it.
Is it still
And then
going to
I'm
increase
add-
our deficit to like,
Yeah, that's where that $4 million comes in.
Yeah.
And every year it grows.
Yeah.
What's the increase? So the first one's 6.5%. What's
It's
the
every year. It's 18% every 3 years, essentially. So it's like 6 to 6.5, depending on what year.
Who all was actually in the negotiations last summer with?
Board does not participate.
So why is that scenario there?
That's the case in the state of Maryland, that the board members do not. You actually designated a negotiation team and guide that team in where the board wants to go. the various different bargaining units also have an opportunity to have X amount of seats at the table, and they decide who's going to be on their team. They also come with their MSEA rep who guides their discussions as well.
Is that law?
Yeah, but the board has the opportunity, you get, during closed session, one of the topics that we typically talk about is collective bargaining, and that's where the board has the ability to set parameters and give directives to the negotiating team who are actually sitting down with the negotiating team for the union. But yes, that is the law, where the law mandates that the public employer and the union designate teams, and only specified people can be on those teams in advance to conduct negotiations. But, you get
Or
updates.
can't designate a single individual to be on that team?
Sorry?
You can,
No, you do.
You
And
approve
actually,
the team.
you approve the team.
So I'm saying, did they
But you
just?
want one of us on the team.
Right.
Oh, you
That's what
can't.
I'm saying.
No.
No, you can't have a board
No,
member.
elected
board members
official.
aren't on the team.
I can't be on there either, just FYI. I mean, like, I'm a board
Does that
member, so I
change
can't be on
when
it
we
either.
had talked about the open, does that change? When we had talked about
Right.
doing everything at open, and then right after that, Rochelle said they had made a law that
Yeah,
no
so-
more collective bargaining and open, like, does that have anything to do with?
The law changed over the summer to require that collective bargaining negotiations take place in closed. This is all from the new
Seems kind of fishy
agency.
sometimes.
Well, the new agency that was created a little over a year ago, called the Public Employee Relations Board, consolidated, it is one board that handles public negotiations. It's a consolidated board, and it basically swallowed up three boards that existed prior: the Public School Labor Relations Board, the State Higher Education Labor Relations Board, and the State Labor Board. Those ceased to exist and all got swallowed up into what's now the PERB. The PERB promulgates regulations, and those regulations are where these rules and the statute which the legislature created, which created the PERB. Those are the laws that we're discussing right now, which require that the public school employer and the union designate team members, that the negotiations take place in closed. That was a reg that came out. So that's the kind of background to all this, of what Dr. Salins, accurately shared just now.
Right.
But, again, the board can and should be deeply involved in negotiations through getting updates from the team in closed session, providing directives and parameters to the team in closed session. And, when that happens, that's your opportunity to ask questions, say, hey, these are our priorities, these are the limits, things like that.
So, not that we can make changes right now, but these people, are they individuals that have been on boards at this level? Because we approve the budget, we're trying to do stuff with the board. Would that not be privy for individuals that, even like yourself, you can't be on the board either, but would it not be privy to be in the negotiations?
In negotiating, wait, I'm sorry,
So
you're
would
the
it not-
negotiating team?
Correct.
So typically, the negotiation team is
be
your
HR
typically your
and
HR
finance.
director is your chief negotiator. Sometimes in the bigger districts, they have an attorney full-time on staff that either is there in negotiations, sometimes will be the chief negotiator, sometimes will just add counsel to the chief negotiator. And then typically it's your executive team members that sit, and then you have a person who takes notes. That's usually somebody from HR department. So that everything can be accurately captured as they negotiate back and forth. You want to make sure that you're capturing those things correctly. And a principal or two, depending on which bargaining unit it is. So we've had a high school and an elementary principal that has sat on the majority of them, not the ones for bus drivers, but sit on the ones for your support staff, your even your admin staff.
And
So
then when that contract or that agreement comes to the board for approval, so the board went and approved, that was all approved just last year
correct.
for that 18% raise and everything.
For the 3 years, yes. And that was for 4 out of 5 of our bargaining units. Now, we do have one that comes open this year, correct, Sid? Mr. Pinder?
That's,
Bus drivers?
that's the LLC,
The LOC comes open
That's-
this year.
yeah,
Okay.
totally separate.
But we have 3-year contracts for everybody else.
In no way am I saying this happened recently, this is just saying, what if the
Oh, is it
directives
2
and the
years?
guidance from the board is not being relayed in the negotiations? Like I said, this is I'm not saying this happened, I'm just hypothetically speaking. What if that is happening and those agreements and those directives, and nothing's getting relayed to, in these negotiations,
Well, the board shouldn't approve the contract if they haven't felt that they were a part of that. And you can go back and look, at least since we've been here, you'll see negotiations on every single closed agenda for
Yeah.
a very long period of time as you are constantly getting updated. Even if you have a work session, typically you'll have a closed session just to talk about negotiations.
Once negotiations are open, it's on every agenda.
on every
And
agenda.
ultimately, the contract comes to the board to sign, to
Yes.
approve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
So-
has to have a vote carry, so it has to have at least 3 votes to carry.
Okay.
and the reasoning why this, we could probably talk about this another time. I'm curious why they got away from the open, what the reasoning behind it, but we can discuss
Well,
that
We've never
off
had.
topic.
It's-
I'm not saying here, not us.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm saying like.
I can just say real quick, it's
Mm-hmm.
always been the prerogative of the public agency, because the public agency is the one that is subject to the Open Meetings Act, whether or not those negotiations take place in closed or in open, and there's case law for that. But actually, that was the subject of a recent case before the PERB, and then after that, and the PERB, basically that's exactly what the PERB said. It's the prerogative of the public agency, not just public school systems, but other public agencies that are subject to this law. And then, like, I don't know if the timeline, it was like a month or weeks after that decision came out, the PERB adopted new regs, and I'm actually looking at it now, just for your reference. It's in COMAR. So when I say COMAR, that's a regulation. The Maryland Code is the statutes that the General Assembly
That's in your list.
enacts. COMAR 14.30.13.01. This is the, in the section of regs governing the PERB, that's where it says that the negotiations take place in closed sessions. So they kind of enacted a rule in response to a dispute between another school system in the state and their union about whether or not negotiations should take place in open or in closed. And in response, and ruled in favor of the school system, but then said, you know what, we're going to make a one rule for all. So, but yeah, good question. And I guess, negotiations haven't come up because you're not in the midst of it right
Exactly.
now.
Said we're-
Most
Yeah.
districts are actually negotiating right now. But because we have a multi-year contract, that's why we're not currently in the midst of negotiations. So typically, we would be doing like a negotiation update or whatever at every meeting, but we're not. This is really what ANS is 2. I misspoke on that. ANS contract's 2 years, but support unit 1 and 2 and 3 are all 3 years. My apologies. So actually, this is just the information that we had to share with the board this evening to give just a start. This was the only document that we really did want to kind of get back just because it was so unfinished and
Right.
still in drafts.
So
But
at
the
this-
others are certainly, hopefully you'll be able to utilize that information.
So looking at this piece, and right now, it's $8 million. Without any other updates, without any other changes, that's the number that we need.
No, that's not accurate.
I know this is
That's
just the
just where we're
start.
at
That's
now,
where we're,
Yeah.
that's where we're at with the start.
So,
So-
well, I think we need to consider the 5 million that we put in as a place marker if the board wants to take that out, because that would increase this number by
5 million.
5.
Right.
And then also, remember all these goals right here?
Yeah, have to be filled in.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So if we, based on what we did last year, can you guesstimate how much more
Well, if
above what we did last
Do you want me
year?
to take the 5 out and the state
Yeah.
money out? Or leave the state money in?
No, leave the state money in, but take out the 5, because we don't know that that's a guarantee.
Well, the state money, we don't know if that's guaranteed either. It's, like, that's regardless, but we would just like to see where we're at with what we need, what's gonna be, this is what I'm saying, because
So last year, they came to us with,
there's 2
if
separate
we-
numbers anyway, so
Yeah.
regardless,
Well,
you're gonna
right.
put it in
I
there
mean,
either
Right.
way, yeah.
I'm
We're not at the
telling you,
final
this is
budget, yeah.
this is hard because you're kind of putting me on the spot. But if I had to put an initial number out there, it would be 12.
okay.
That's what I was
So for
But
the new
I think
members,
Dr. Kibler, any comment on that?
so
Can I maybe speak to why the 5 is there and we feel relatively comfortable having it there now?
Okay.
Just because, we do have the liaison meetings and the public budget work sessions that or budget listening sessions is maybe a better way to describe it, that the commissioners have had over the past few years. They've talked about for 3 years, needing to give the Board of Education an additional $5 million. Saying that publicly, it's not a promise, anything like that. But they have spoken about that, and it kind of continuously comes up. This would be the 3rd year for that amount, and that's why we have that there
And
now.
actually, Jack, at one point, has shared publicly 7.
And it's still not a guarantee.
Because
You can go
I mean, he
back.
does know.
He does.
He does know. He
Yeah.
knows, and he has said 7. And so, I mean, we've had a variation basically between a $5 million conversation and a $7 million conversation that they've had in the public that we've listened to and captured. So that's why we feel fairly confident that they are going to support us at $5 million.
Do either of you remember the 3 numbers from last year? So last year, for the new members, we got 3 scenarios for keeping the school system whole. One was the absolute, positively, if we just get maintenance of effort, this is where we are. There was a middle number, which I think is the one we asked for, which was about 9.
Right, it was 5.
Right,
Because
5
we had-
million.
We had anticipated a placeholder that they would support us at 5. So it
Correct.
was 5, and then it was
9.
I think it was 9.7. I
7,
don't know.
and I
That's in
think it
my
was
head.
12.4.
12.4 to keep every single person and every single thing flat. No furloughs, no rifts, no anything. Everything would go straight. And it was this board's decision to go for the 9. And that's what we were working towards. But between what didn't come in from federal and state, and even though the commissioners went above and beyond, we were still short.
Right, so they did
And
give us
that's-
5, and then once we went through their 3 budget
Meetings.
community meetings.
Yes.
They ended up giving us an additional 1.2, so they ended up really giving us 6.2.
Just still
which was-
about
Yeah,
2 something less than what we,
yeah.
2.8
Yeah,
less than what
yeah,
we
yeah,
needed.
Exactly, about 3, yeah.
So,
I
When
do have a
does-
question. So the budget book from last year that Carrie passed out, so when you compare this paper that you guys want back to the other one, so on the 2024 for,
what page do you on?
as soon as you open it up, page 451, under, this one has health insurance placeholder, we have $3.3 million for there. And in this one for this year, we have 1.5 million.
Yes, and that is because if you remember that there was the insurance actually captured within the budget book was captured at a decrease of 400,000, but it actually went up $1 million. So we had to make up that 1.4 million in addition to the actual rising cost of insurance.
Okay, so for
That's a
the
very
other
good point.
items that are on here that are basically on the 2024, is there any way to calculate those, like even if you add an extra 5-10% or?
That's exactly where we are right now.
Okay.
So we've just really started the
I would just
process,
let her know.
and we're trying to pull together this for everyone tonight, and, so we're literally just there. I know Mr. Pinder's working with a lot of his things. He's waiting kind of on that couple of the ESMEC things that we talked about. He's tracking his heating and oil, and then ultimately when he gets maybe in a better sweet spot, maybe in about a month, we'll come back and we'll hopefully have some targeted numbers, with some increases.
Is there anything that you guys know of that is gonna be a major change?
Yes, so, we already know that our energy costs are going up 15%, and we already know that the health insurance rate increase is at 10%.
Okay.
So that's accounted on here, but, Mr. Pinner doesn't have his final numbers right now, but he said likely by the end of next month he'll have them.
Okay.
So, we hope to, yeah, all of these things here that aren't filled in, we hope to next time when we come to you, have some additional information in those, but we didn't want to not bring it because we didn't have it all. We wanted to get a starting point tonight so that, you guys could start thinking about wrapping your heads around it and then just at least, as I said, get a starting point. And then this document will constantly be changing. The summary page will constantly change as we get additional information on revenue, as we get additional information from the state, from our insurance, from all these different factors.
And based on your all's feedback too.
Right, of course, we'll bring it, and you might say, you know, we don't think that this or that, or we want more information on this item, and so we can bring that and prepare that for you.
Just one question, the laptop lease, I see from last year it was $354, $692, and then this year there's like a lease. How long is that lease for?
So I
Laptops?
can speak to both question, or it's kind of a two-party. It's a 4-year lease, I believe, Mr. Pender, correct me maybe, but I think it's a 4-year. The reason you see a large sum last year is because last year was the first year of the lease, so it went in, the first payment was $354. It's gonna be that $50,000 more this year than what it was last year across those categories.
And that's for 4 years.
Yes, and I'm not sure how much it goes up the other 2 years off the top.
So this year will be 404.
This is the second one, I think. I think last year that 354 was the first, so this is
a $50,000 increase.
correct.
Correct.
So it's 404 this year.
Gotcha.
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you said 4 for 4.
Oh, no.
Sorry, I'm sorry. No, it's my
Yes.
fault.
Yes, that just reflects the increase,
Okay.
not the actual whole,
$50,000.
right, not the actual whole payment.
And it's because the
it
350 is
is
currently
already
in there.
captured in the
These are
budget.
just the changes we're
Yeah,
making.
just the changes,
Up or down?
up or down, right.
When is the drop dead date to have a budget completely finished, signed, approved, stamped, move forward?
Well, typically, the board would vote and approve a budget in March to go to the commissioners so that they can start to build their budget through the month of April, and then they hold their hearings in early May. And then they actually have built in a meeting to kind of summarize and pull all the budget together and tie up loose ends towards the end of May. And then in June, that second Tuesday in June, I believe, is when they vote on it. So now, the last 2 years, they haven't used that May meeting, and they have the second May meeting after the 3 hearings or opportunities for the community to engage. They haven't utilized that. I think they had a great idea of what they were going to do. They made some decisions, and they did ultimately tell us very close to the very end of May, between the 28th and 30th. I remember them sharing with us what our final number was going to be, which was the additional 1.2 for a total of 6.2. So,
And we won't
as
know
of
the
June
decision
1st.
until the end of April on the decreased state funding with the blueprint stuff. So
Likely
there is
won't.
a big question mark still looming.
Yes, likely will not know that information. The end of session's typically in the middle of April. I think this year, I don't even know. It started on January 8th. If we track it out, it's 90 days, so, right?
Are the commissioners aware that this is something that will affect our budget?
You mean the legislation?
The possibility
Yes.
that we are going to be,
Yeah, I send them the same articles like that I send you guys. I send to Todd and ask him to share them. And we do meet with them on a monthly occasion, and they do hear what our needs are. And, we'll next time we meet with them, we'll be sharing this information that we shared with you and making sure that if they have any questions, we can follow up with that and help them to kind of track where we are.
So I have a couple questions here, and we're gonna have to get into, I know we're talking about budgeting, I know we got whole numbers here, and we're looking at a high level here. But I do believe we have to look in deeper in some aspects when we come into our spending, especially where we're at. Whether that's making $1,000 change here or $10,000 here. I think we need to go into basic micro accounting and dive in deep and understand where all our spending is. I reiterated this last time. And it's not to
You
dive
should be
in,
able
it's
to do
not
that
trying.
with the 5-year. The 5-year trend data is exactly why we provided that information
Right.
for you. That gives you the ability to personally go line item by line item
Right.
and see where it was budgeted and what actually, so that if you have questions next time, you come and say, hey, I noticed this line item, can we cut $10,000 there? And give us an opportunity to respond, and whether, yes, we can, or no, that's a state mandate, or, certainly some of our line items, like specifically, I just off of my head, athletics that has the mandates for the AUDs, is that what they're?
AEDs, helmets, shoulder pads.
Shoulder pads, and they have to be reconditioned,
Conditioning.
and there's some things that we just don't have any control over that has to come out of certain line items, so, but those are things that are good questions to ask, and we certainly will provide whatever information you all need to make good decisions.
Some questions that I've actually have come from teachers and other folks in the community. They've asked me, and we've talked about spending and such, is how many individuals have, we'll say, business cards or purchase cards throughout the school district, and what is the typical annual cost that is put on these credit cards? Who's tracking them? Who's approving the purchases with them? And can we see these card statements on what these individuals are purchasing, and what does that amount to?
Okay, so that was like 10 questions in one.
Yeah, I'm
So
sorry.
stick
Yeah,
with
yeah,
me.
yeah, I'm
Stick
sorry.
with me. And so typically, your building level people will have we call it a P card, a purchasing card, a P card. A lot of people in SIDS department have P cards, such as maintenance, technology, and things like that. What do they purchase on those cards? Varying things from, equipment, things like that. If it's a smaller cost, even at the school level, it might be, I need 2 replacement textbooks and I found them on Amazon, and you're not gonna do a PO for that. You're just gonna order those types of things. So who approves those? There's several layers of approval through those, so they all get tracked through our finance department. Everybody has a different spending limit. They have a different spending limit per purchase and per day. So all of that is tracked, and all of those permissions come through basically my office if they need to increase something or decrease something. So I think I have most of your questions.
Right.
But yes.
Are we able to see those statements monthly to see what is being purchased with them?
I guess we could pull those. Is there a specific, grade band or a specific department that you want us to pull? Because to pull all of those would probably be pretty challenging for a department that's already, as we know, we've talked about understaffed, and we're trying to hire a new accountant right now and actually posting for a CFO position, so.
So each card, I'm gonna ask how it works. Is each card assigned to each individual have a different account number to it?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so we can see,
Do you want me
There
to
should
pull
be-
mine and give you that one to just start with, and you can see what that looks like?
I would prefer to see a majority of them, because each statement, I can go online to I'm just saying, I'm not trying to get contentious, I'm saying, I can go online, click on my account, and print out my statement.
Sure.
Like, that's not a difficult task.
No, but it
So-
is time consuming when you do have a lot of, it is. With you, it's just one individual,
Right.
but to looking
So
at
how
every
many are we
principal.
talking?
Well, we have, Sid, how many would you say you have in yours? I would say for,
schools?
Well, just in my department, 11 maintenance, 2 ComTech, and myself.
and then, every executive
So
team
then-
member has one, every principal has one. Ms. Dennis, is it every administrative secretary also has one?
Those 12-month secretaries would have them.
Yeah.
So we're saying 40 to 50, is it not in the same bank, or are they not tied to the same
They're all
account?
through, JP Morgan.
So isn't that like a click? Shouldn't it be like, so whenever I have multiple accounts at the same bank, I log into the same thing, and it could be all my different, say, credit cards or bank cards are all there, so you just click, print, back, click, print, back, right? It can't take more than 20 minutes to go and print all that, right? 20, 30 minutes? I'm just trying to see it because I've been getting several questions and
What are the
asked.
questions that you've been getting? Maybe you could share them
We're
with me.
asking, why do so many people have so many P cards, and what is the reason behind it? Is there a necessity for that many? And who's tracking the purchases? Because people,
Well,
I've
as I said,
asked
there's
them.
multi-levels of approval, so nobody can just go out and buy something and not have it approved by several layers in the actual system. So I have to go in, so for every time that Mr. Pinder uses his card, I have to physically go in and look at every single purchase to see where, is it a legitimate purpose for that? And so, there
but
are
is it a
different.
necessity that many people, all the assistants have, the secretary, like, it's,
A lot of times that, there are such small limits that, for instance, typically it's for when they travel, to be honest with you.
Right.
So our principals really don't use the cards very often unless they're traveling. And it is easier to travel when you have a P card, so that you're not kind of waiting on someone else or having to take a check with you, and which is, just more challenging. So, the principals don't use their cards very often. The administrative secretaries use their cards typically for MOI, which is your materials of instruction. Your supervisors typically use them for both materials of instruction and for travel. Mr. Pinder, his folks use them often because they are out there in the field and they need, cord for this or, this type of
Once,
whatever replacement.
I can only speak for my department, but once it comes in, I look at it and see where it is coded to which account. So all of the accounts drop down, and I'm just making this up, okay, is it Churchill Elementary School? Does it fall into the maintenance category? Does it fall into like HVAC? Is it assigned into those are right count numbers? Years ago, finance got tired of and I'm just using this as an example of getting all the invoices from say, a local hardware store of, okay, we're gonna write a check out for that, using your P card for that. For a lot of ours are smaller items that, are a necessity to have, a belt that goes on a motor, you need a belt, those types of things. But each one of them that comes in, like I said, for my area, I have to code in there, does it fall within this category? Which school is it at? It has to all be coded correctly. And then it
Some of
goes
the
to.
Where does
When
this
you
fall
put-
in the budget?
Excuse me?
Where does this spending fall in the
It
budget?
falls all through the budget. So like I said, with Sid, it falls into several different categories. So that's what he just said, there's a drop down and he has to determine what category does that go to? What is the account number he's gonna use?
And they
for
match
that.
the counts, the chart of accounts in the P card system match
Yeah.
exactly.
And it's interesting because a lot of things that we do, even I'm thinking as a principal, if I want to secure a field trip and I have to do a down payment for that trip or whatnot, even though those monies might have been raised, from their PTA or something like that. For us to be able to secure it, we have to have a P card. We have to have a credit card in
Right.
order to secure that. We can't do it. A lot of places won't do checks anymore, believe it or not. And if they do, sometimes they charge you more if you're not able to secure it electronically. So,
Another question is, when they go on travel, say they're going on training somewhere or something like that, and you say they should use their P card, correct? Do they not give you a
They do.
preemptive travel?
they do. They have to fill out a form. It
Right.
has to go through 4
Yeah,
different
because we do the same thing in the
signatures.
government.
Yeah.
Every time I went, I had my per
Absolutely.
diem rate from my hotel,
We do.
my travel costs,
Yep.
And get
So-
it approved
Yep,
before
and
you,
get it
Right.
approved
Yes.
before. so-
before you make the reservations and all that other
Exactly
stuff.
right. And as minimal as we can, so say for instance, if they're going to a conference for 2 days and there's a per diem rate of food, we try to front load that so that they don't have to use their P card. So we try to minimize the use of P cards at all costs. So typically those P cards are not used for food and for things. They're used for the hotel, which you've already had a reservation for, which has already been approved at several layers before they even go.
Okay, so it's a lot of these questions is because I'm trying to gain the knowledge on it.
sure.
These aren't accusatory by any means. So moving forward though, can we see what the expenditures are? Are they bringing receipts with them?
Well, it depends. A lot of times they have receipts, but so as I said, sometimes it's front loaded, so they don't have to have a
Right.
receipt at
Well,
all.
I
But if
got
they're
that,
using
yeah.
it, it has to have
Yeah,
a
per
receipt
diem,
attached.
things like, well,
And
they
it
should still
can't-
be bringing back a receipt for proof, right? When you pay for a hotel.
They have to have the receipt and
Right.
it has to show that the taxes aren't there, so they have to use our tax exempt information.
And the charges on the P card can't move through the system without receipts being attached.
Correct. They won't get reimbursed
I think
for it
that
unless they
answers-
have a receipt.
I'm hoping that's.
So it's tied to the person if they use it, so it's like our government travel cards. So if I go and buy something at Best Buy, throwing it out there, and it doesn't get approved, I'm liable and it's my credit.
That's exactly
So they're the
right.
same exact way.
That's exactly
Okay.
right. Or, in a rare occasion, I've seen where somebody used their card by accident because it's in their wallet and they're like, oh my gosh, they have to pay a check to the organization they have to pay us a check to make sure that it's
Right.
paid for through them personally, so they're liable for it.
So between just seeing some of the expenditures, what those are and what they're approved for, and some of the spending,
Sure.
I would request to be able to see.
Do you want every single P card in every single month from
I
what
didn't,
month?
not every month.
Okay, so what?
Just, we'll start with the most previous, the most recent one. Say November, because
So
January,
November.
December.
So you
a lot
want
of
every
folks-
single P card
Statement.
line item statement for the
Correct.
month of November?
Yes.
Okay,
Just to see what's going on, just peace of mind. And then, also looking, as we mentioned before, a request for, purchases and expenditures that are going out in the month too, so we can start gaining a better understanding of what expenditures are happening within the school district on a monthly basis. I know we can sit here and look at numbers, but I want to, sometimes those things fluctuate. And I know we're taking into account, but when we're getting down to the nitty gritty, we're talking about furloughs. I want to be able to transparently and confidently speak to our community, and not saying that you guys aren't, but from my peace of mind, look at the differences, look where we're at, look what we can do. We have this to go line by line, but I want to go in there and see what the fluctuations happen and
So you
what.
want to see a copy, or you want documentation of every bill that's been paid in the month of November? Is that what you're requesting?
I would like
For
to see what all the
clarification.
expenditures
So every
of,
bill every
Right.
bill that's paid, or, I mean, what do you, I don't know.
Did you say different schools at first? I don't know.
I didn't
if
say
that's what
different, I mean, we can start with just the
Oh,
high
okay.
schools, I
Sorry,
mean.
I didn't-
and-
Oh, you just want that? Okay, so you
Oh,
want.
no, I'm asking, I'm kind of trying to get some
I mean,
like
like,
understanding, because I want to be able to see where we're at with, say, hey, your monthly bill for, the gas, what's a fluctuation, what increases are we seeing, per month basis, or the electric, or we had an expenditure to, say, put up new scoreboards, or we had this. I just want to start seeing where we're going with expenditures, what we're doing, so if there is some things that we see that might be in miscellaneous that continue to happen, that just keep falling, that people have overlooked, maybe we catch it and be like, hey, this expenditure, hey, this is one of those things that we can pull out that is $1,000 a month. I know that only comes out to 12 grand, but that's a step in the right direction. I'm not saying anything bad's going on or we're missing or doing anything on purpose, but there's things that can fall into different categories that just easily gets left or not seen. But if we start getting fresh eyes on it, maybe somebody picks up on that and be like, oh, well, yeah, that's been going on for 10 years now, but that's something that we could probably get rid of that's $1,000 a month. And then that one, and then this one. I'm just trying to go in and so we can confidently tell the union, tell the community that we've done everything and gone through every nook and cranny of the budget and our expenditures and what we're putting out in our taxpayer dollars to fulfill the budget and be on budget and not have to go into extreme measures.
and I'm absolutely happy to provide all of that. for
I'll come
the
and sit
board.
down in the office. It doesn't
I'm
have to
happy
be
to
here.
provide
I'll
it,
take
but-
time out of my day and come and sit down and look at the expenditures with each principal and each staff member. I mean, I'm all for using my time to come. I'll sit down. We can set up a
That's
meeting.
not, that's really actually probably not appropriate. I think Adam would agree
I would
with
say,
me
go
that
through
for-
the administration,
Right.
let
I'm just saying I
Dr.
would.
Salins do
I'm
that with her
throwing that.
team.
I'm not saying I'm going to. I said I
But sure.
would be willing to do that.
And
is what I'm saying.
I completely appreciate where you're coming from, especially as a new member and just trying to gain this information. And I'm happy to provide all of it for you. But I also just want to pose the question, then what is my staff here for? Each one of my staff members has a role and a responsibility to uphold. They literally, that's their job, is to ensure that we are spending appropriately. That's my job. You charge me with that job as a superintendent to instill in my staff, monitor, and hold my staff accountable for doing their day-to-day operations of this organization. And for us to provide to the board so that they can go behind my staff and say, I want to see every credit card statement so I can review every single line item that has been done, I think is a little disrespectful to my staff, to be honest with you. It's a little disrespectful to say that this board is going to look line item by line item to see if they can help, when I do think there's a little bit of different motivation there. And I'm
shouldn't you
happy to
want
do
help?
it. I'm happy. No, actually, I really feel like we have experts, and I'm not an expert in everything, and I don't claim to be an expert in everything, and that's why I have hired.
So you're saying
appropriate
fresh
staff
eyes
members.
and other people to help and understand and gain
Happy to
another.
do it.
Can I
Absolutely.
say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
The superintendent through her administrative team runs the day-to-day system, you all provide oversight, right? The board members, elected officials don't necessarily come in and work here every day. But your job is to come here and ask questions. And so you have a question about the P cards. The right way, what I would see as an appropriate avenue for getting that information is saying, next month, I'd like to see a report with that information. So rather than basically work here, and review accounts, say, I want to see a report next month of the P card transactions for that month. And then, have a finance report presented to the entire board. That way, the entire board is getting the same exact information as, each member is getting the same exact information that every other member is getting. You're allowing the administration to gather that information and present it to you. And then you all can, when you're presented with that information, you can ask questions and say, here's recommendations that we have, here's fixes that we want to see, or, thanks for that information, I feel better now. That's the kind of the right way to exercise, the oversight role while letting the folks who work here every day, do their job. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. If you want to, you absolutely should. It's just going through the, we want to see this presented at a meeting. We want to report at a meeting. I want, and if it's all if it's a quarterly statement of P cards, then it's a quarterly statement of P cards, and get that. But that way you all have that same information rather than one particular board member coming in and going through it where that leaves the other board members out and not.
I'm not trying to leave anybody out.
Oh, no, I'm
by
not
any
saying,
means. That's all I'm trying to-
it's just a natural consequence of one board member coming in and, going through, which you can absolutely do. It's just for the benefit of the entire board, saying, administration, we want to see a report on this next month. That way the entire board can consider it, all operating from the same playbook. That's what I would suggest.
And this isn't disrespect to you by any means.
And
This
I-
is as
and I
a
don't think
board,
it is, yeah.
we're not trying to
I just-
undermine your,
I just feel
but
like
we're
when
not
we
trying to
do
undermine your
hire people
expertise.
To do a
Right.
job,
And I got you.
I
But
think
we're
that's
not-
really
but we're
something
in
that
a
we need
budget
to.
scenario.
I clearly
All I'm
understand
trying to
that,
do is help.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying, I'm not trying to undermine anybody in the school district saying they're not doing their job.
No.
That's not what I'm asking.
So-
I'm just trying to come in and help. And what I'm trying to do is come in and help. And I understand what you're saying, oversight, that's fine. And you said, this is why the board hired you, and
It's
you think
true.
you're expected.
That's
That's
my-
fine, I got it.
Yeah.
Understand. But we were also hired, or not hired, but elected by the taxpayers, I know we're all taxpayers too, to oversight and understand the budget and try to fix the budget to be on track where we're not in a deficit. So at the same time, that's why we were elected. I understand this is your job, this is their job, this is why your staff's here, and they're experts, and they're fantastic. I am not taking anything away from them. So it is zero disrespect in any way, shape, or form. But all we're trying to do is just figure out a way. And if we just come up here on monthly meeting or weekly meetings and only see reports on a monthly basis, that's not, we can see different things and we can see the numbers here, but that's, to me, that's not putting our best effort. So if we can collaboratively work together in some way where we can, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, but if we can find a better way to dive into these numbers in a deeper scale to see what's going on, that's all I'm trying to accomplish. I'm not trying to sit here and go in a different manner and go by myself to sit there and by myself here and go away from the board or undermine you in any way. I'm just trying to do my due diligence as an elected official to take this budget and make sure we're on par with the amount of money that we're getting, so we're not hampering our education of our students and our staff and educators taking days off that are unnecessary. So if that's what comes to it, I know you guys are doing your best, but I also see other eyes, fresh eyes that don't look at it every single day, sometimes see things differently than people that do see it every day. That's all I'm saying. Whether I went about doing that the right way and making those requests, my bad. All I'm saying is I think we need to find a way to collaborate, to work together, that word,
That word.
better.
What I'm hearing is just that the board wants more detail. Is that fair?
Correct.
Yeah.
But we also have, you just said till March. That's a month and a half away. So if we wait till next month to see this, I'm just saying, we need to progress through this quicker. And I'm not, I know you guys are busy. I'm just saying, we have to find a way to come together to figure this out. And I know that it's it's your last time here. You want to leave on a good foot or a good note. We want to take care of this so we can progressively move forward with the next superintendent as well.
So
Yeah,
just
I don't
to
see anything, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. And
No.
I just
So
think
just
that.
to summarize,
I'm gonna
we're
suggest
gonna
that-
provide a report to the board that has every P-card transaction in the month of November. And then we're also going to track every expenditure that is spent out in the same month.
I think if the,
Hear it?
so Well, I just want to make sure. The board is giving a directive to the administration to report back. I'm just trying to make sure we're all,
Yeah, I
the
wanna make
board
sure I know what my
gives
homework is.
directives to the administration to report back on, with certain information.